Hello, everybody. I am the Night Owl, and welcome to my first ever set review. Yes, today we are going to be reviewing The Brothers War. I'm super excited for this. I've been wanting to do a set review for a while, and this is going to be my first opportunity. I'm really glad you all decided to join me here. Couple of things to get out of the way first. So First, just how I'm going to be going through this. I have this sorted into color and rarity. I'm going to be going through each color and then going up the rarity for each one of those colors. I just thought that might be the best way to do it. So we're going to be starting here with the white commons, then the uncommons, then the rares and mythic rares. I should be going through these in Wooburg fashion. So white, blue, black, red, green. I said that right? Yep. And then colorless and multicolored. Obviously, there's going to be a big fat section of colorless for this set, which is going to be kind of cool. I also just because you'll see I'm using Scryfall here. Seeing as I am not a master editor myself, nor do I have the time, nor do I have an editor on hand. This is going to be kind of the best technology I've figured to go through this. So I'll be going through these cards one at a time here. Forgive me for the side by side. This is kind of the best setup I've been able to figure out so far. Hopefully by the next set review I'll be able to improve it a little bit. But right now this is kind of what we're looking at. I hope this isn't too distracting for you. Um, and goodness, I felt like I had another message with that. Oh, and then some of the prototype cards, as you'll see, we'll get into prototype. Some of those might be considered cards of the specific color that they go in. If they have a white prototype, a black prototype cost. I have those mixed in with all of the colorless cards currently because I'm doing this on Scryfall here. So that is that. A couple other notes before we get into this. First, I'm going to be giving these cards letter grade as long as I remember to do that. As this is my first set review, I have a good sense of how to letter grade. If you ever watch like a limited resources set review, or a couple other content creators do set reviews as well, they tend to give letter grades. I would say, and they all give this caveat too, but I'll say this especially for mine here. Take the letter grades with a big old grain of salt because I'm not typically used to grading these on a letter basis. It's kind of not really how I think about cards anyways. But I will be giving them a grade if that is helpful to you. But more importantly, as that caveat goes, it's more about the things that I have to say about them and kind of the analysis behind the cards. And on that note, if you've ever watched any of my content so far, you know that I like to talk about stuff. I will sit and talk about one card for a very long time if that's what comes to mind. And so there's something to be said for brevity. And I won't try to be a maniac while I'm doing this, but I have two options. I could either, focus on trying to truncate these to just churn through it and like get through them and get them all graded and just say some stuff. Or I could kind of lean into my natural style and just kind of give my thoughts about these cards as they come. So this might be a little bit more verbose than some set reviews that you might be used to. But if you're a fan of my content, I imagine you kind of are interested in what I have to say, and that's just how I'm going to treat this. I'm just going to talk about every aspect of the card I can think about here. So I just want to get that out of the way. What else do I have to say? So cards, as you know, are all evaluated in a context, right? My understanding, having not played the set even just a wink, like even a little bit, right? I have the impression that this is going to be a slower rather than faster set. I could be very wrong about this, but I mean, you see that there's like lots of like gigantic, 9, 10 mana artifacts that, granted, power stones are going to be part of the set to help you ramp these out. However, my impression is that this set will be on the slow side. Maybe not on the slowest, but rather definitely on the slow side as opposed to the fast side. I could be very wrong about that, but the reason I bring that up right now is because I'm going to be evaluating these cards within that context a little bit with just that kind of initial impression that might be the case for this set specifically. If it turns out that I am wrong, there's going to be a lot of little adjustments that you're going to need to make to the evaluation, obviously. But I just want to like set the tone that going into this set review, that is kind of where my head is at as far as what the format looks to me at a glance. Now, I've looked over the format a couple of times, and the set, you know what I mean, whatever. I've looked over the set a few times, and but I haven't like really sank my teeth into it. I just kind of looked at cards as they've come up. So some of this will be new to me. Some of it I've looked at before. It just at like a cursory glance, and I won't have like thought deeply about some of these cards yet. So you're going to kind of get my stream of consciousness on a lot of them too. Okay. So I think that is enough of the clerical stuff on the front end. Let's begin. Okay, so our first card here is Aeronaut Cavalry. Aeronaut Cavalry is for a white and for a 3/4 flying creature. When Aeronaut Cavalry enters the battlefield, put a +1/+1 counter on another target soldier you control. So right out the gate, this is going to touch on a couple things that I was thinking about like during the intro here. Um, so for one, a 3/4 flyer is generally in the C to C minus range. You know, if you've watched a few of my other videos, you've heard me mention that I don't like 3/3 flyers for 5 all that much. I find them on the weak side; they're a little soft. 3/4 flyers are about there, but I will say that point of toughness actually does make a big difference in its defensive ability and its ability to survive through removal, which is part of why I don't like the 5 mana 3/3 flyers. They're just a little too easy to trade with something smaller and cheaper that your opponent has. 3/4 flyer is actually decent. Not amazing. Generally is in the C to C minus range. Now, put a +1/+1 counter on another target soldier you control. That's minor upside. That is gigantic, but a +1/+1 counter can enable attacks and allow you to put a little more pressure on. Also, if there's a lot of flying soldiers, which I believe that there are a couple, that's actually a lot more offense, and so that could be really nice when paired with other flying soldiers. And then this also touches on when I was speaking about the speed of the format. The slower the format is, um, the more acceptable a 5 mana 3/4 flyer becomes, because the weakness of a spell like this is it's usually just not big enough or impactful enough at the time that you cast it in a more fast format. If you're under a lot of pressure, a 3/4 flyer isn't gigantic and has a tough time saving you. But if you're not under a lot of pressure in the early game, a 3 power flyer is actually a decent threat even at 5 mana. So I'm going to rate this at about a C. It could be a C minus. I don't think it's going to get to C plus range. It's about there. All right, up next we have Airlift Chaplain. For white and 2, it is a 1/1 flying creature. When Airlift Chaplain enters the battlefield, mill 3 cards. You may put a plains card or a creature card with mana value 3 or less from among the cards milled this way into your hand. If you don't, put a +1/+1 counter on Airlift Chaplain. Okay, I like this card. So a way to think about this is it is a Windrake body, or it could be a 1/1 that nets you a land, a plane specifically, or a creature with converted mana cost value 3 or less. Which so typically that will be the higher upside. I believe a 1/1 flyer for 3 plus a card is probably better than a 2/2 flyer for 3. What I like about this card though is that even if you fail, you hit the fail state, a 2/2 flyer for 3 is like a reasonable card. It's kind of gone down in stock in like recent sets where like just simple Windrake is not quite as good as it used to be. I mean, even look at the last set, we had a 2/3 flyer for 3 that was vanilla, and that card was only decent. But a 2/2 flyer for 3 is still like an acceptable card. Ideally, you want to hit the card for this and draw the extra card. And it doesn't seem that difficult to do. Ideally, you're going to want to play like a good number of planes. I think that there are, if I glancing through the set, there were a couple of cards that kind of incentivize like sort of monocolor directions, where you want to play like a lot more planes or islands or whatever of the specific color that you're playing. So it shouldn't be that difficult to hit a planes or a creature converted mana cost 3 or less. Of course, that's very deck dependent. I would say that this hits at about the C plus range. If you are hitting a creature, ideally a creature, though sometimes hitting the land drop will be better. If you're netting a card off of this and making the 1/1 flyer, I think that that's pretty solid and in the C plus range. A 1/1 flyer is okay. A 1/1 flyer for 3 is like fine, not amazing. But getting the card on top of it, of course, is like pretty great. And then the body can be pretty relevant. It's easy for a 1/1 to just, even a flying 1/1 to just be ineffective on the board. And so I think that even though what I'm driving at is, even though this technically is a 2-for-1, if you get the additional card off of it, it's not like a 1/1 flyer is like a gigantic impact. And there's a chance that you don't even get there with this and it just ends up being the 2/2 flyer. So while this looks like it's like a card that just naturally nets you a 2-for-1, I think it's a little bit worse than that. I think it's all right. C plus about. All right. Up next, we have Ambush Paratrooper, and here's the Flying Soldier, just like I was talking about. A 2-mana, 1/2 Flash Flying Soldier with 5. Creatures you control get +1/+1 until end of turn. Interesting. So if you have a lot of mana, which Power Stones do enable this. Power Stones, by the way, if you're unaware, I don't want to speak like just everybody knows what all the other cards do. A lot of the cards have a mechanic in this set where they create a Power Stone, which is an artifact token that usually ETB's tapped, and it creates a colorless mana that can only be spent on that can't be spent on non-artifact spells, I think is how that text reads. So you can use it for things like abilities, like on Ambush Paratrooper here. Okay. This card, So 1/1 soldier tokens are actually also a major theme of the set. And if you get enough of this going, this actually becomes like a reasonable spell. On its own, a 2 mana 1/2 flying body, even with flash, is very weak. So this really does not do anything until you start activating the ability. Um, so I would say that it rates pretty low there. But if you have a bunch of mana, like if you have enough mana between, your land drops and your power stones to play this and activate it, like all in the same turn, that really is an ambush. Like that's pretty good. But at the same time, it's fairly telegraphed because that's a 7 mana total. Your opponent is going to be able to count to 7, and I bet you that savvy players, as the format develops, will start to see ambush paratrooper coming when it's more and more obvious, and this will turn into less of an ambush as the format develops. I would say that this is probably a C minus. I could be underrating just how useful and important the activated ability is in just about all of your soldiers decks. For example, if all of the white decks look a little bit like the white decks in what's the set we just had, Dominator United, where going wide with tokens was such a major theme that just having this ability, access to this ability all the time, is going to be very important. I could be underrating it a little bit, but I think it's going to be about in the C minus range. You'll probably only want like one of these guys if you do want one, and it's going to be contingent on you going wide to a degree. All right, Deadly Riposte. It is an instant for a white and one. Deadly Riposte deals 3 damage to target tapped creature, and you gain 2 life. These spells that deal damage to a tapped creature tend to play out very awkwardly. I'm going to start out pretty low on this one and call it perhaps a D plus or a C minus. The reason I say that is because the instants that deal damage to only a tapped creature have very limited utility. It's generally only if you are being attacked, or perhaps the creature has some sort of important tap ability. If you have the ability to tap other creatures, which I'm not sure how much of that is in this set, they can go up in stock a little bit, but typically, generally, it's really only useful to defend yourself from your opponent's attacks. Um, that being said, 3 is actually really small for this kind of effect. It's already narrow, and that it only deals damage to a tapped creature, and then it's only 3 damage. If you are under attack from a very aggro style deck with lots of cheap creatures that are definitely going to be attacking you and within this damage range, this actually becomes kind of solid because it becomes a 2 mana removal spell and you gain life on top of that. Against certain decks, it's going to be quite nice. I think that this is going to miss a lot of the time against a lot of creatures and a lot of board states. I'm going to start this at a C minus or a D plus. Disenchant. Okay, here we go. There are a lot of artifacts in this set. I'm gonna call this right now that this is fairly premium. I think it would be premium if it was just Shatter, destroy target artifact. And having the enchantment clause on there as well. I'm not positive how many enchantments, how deep we're gonna go in enchantments in this set at all. I mean, I know that artifacts are the major theme, but sometimes there's also solid enchantments that you want to target as well. The enchantment is clause on here is just going to be gravy for when you want to nail something like that. Whereas typically this is just going to be straight up 2 mana to destroy target artifact, and it's going to hit a huge portion of the format. And not just a huge portion of the format, but a lot of your opponent's best cards. There's a lot of gigantic robots in this set that if your opponent actually ends up able to cast them, you have to be able to deal with that. So yeah, I'm going to rate this at about a B plus right out the gate, and then I'm going to start there and then scale that back as the format develops. And I'm like, okay, maybe I'm overrating the disenchant a little bit. Not everybody has like all these like robot targets for me to point this at. I'm going to start by saying that I think most decks are going to have a target. And it's important to understand for removal too that just having a target isn't quite good enough. Like you generally want it to be a good target or more than one target, because if your opponent only has like one artifact in their deck and then you have the disenchant to get the one artifact, well, you're actually kind of on the losing side of that equation because it's a lot more likely for you to be caught with the disenchant in your hand. And it's only effective when they draw their one artifact and you draw your disenchant. But if they draw their artifact and you don't, well, okay, that's that. And then if you draw your disenchant and they don't draw their artifact, well, now you're hosed, But that's not going to be the case in this set, I don't think. There's going to be plenty of artifacts running around. This will almost always find a target super cheaply. Obviously, can't get everything. There are colored spells, but this is going to be pretty premium. It could even stone rain your opponent by destroying one of their power stones. I doubt that's going to be a play very often, but you're going to feel like very clever when you do realize that destroying a power stone is actually the way to go. So, yeah, B plus on disenchant to start with. All right, Lauren's Escape. It is an instant for a single white. Target artifact or creature gains hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. Scry 1. I'm also going to start by rating this card fairly low. So this is a combat trick, but it's really less of a combat trick and much more of a shore up slash deep dive type card. It doesn't provide any stats, which typically in your white aggressive decks, not that white necessarily needs to be aggressive, but if you're trying to push through in combat, a combat trick that does not add any stats to your creature and also doesn't give like death touch or something like that, that it allows it to at least kill whatever's blocking it, is just not where you want to be. So in other words, this isn't like a aggro combat trick or what you might call a combat trick. It's much more of a shore up deep dive kind of card where it's actually more about saving a critical threat. Um, and in that regard, it's only okay, but it really doesn't provide a lot of the value that we've seen in like these other same cards. You know, those both of those other cards I named did add stats. I mean, Shore Up added +1/+1 and an untap. Now it didn't make it indestructible, but I think that I would actually rather have the other clause on it because a lot of the time you're using this to stop a removal spell anyways. So once you give it the hexproof, the indestructible doesn't matter. You know, it does tussle in combat a little bit better, so I will give it that. I'm going to say this is a D. I'm going to say this is a D. I just don't think that you're going to want to do this very often unless you have like a couple of specific critical threats. And even then, it's kind of a really all-in plan on that. Like you have this one card just to save that critical threat like way later in the game. And like up until then, it's going to be kind of gumming up your hand. Even with the scry on there, I don't think that that ups this to being very, very good. Um, Again, I could be proved wrong on this. One lesson that I did learn from Shore Up in the last set is I have a tendency to underrate these kind of cards to begin with, but I just don't see this doing a lot. I don't see you being excited for this to make your deck at all, unless you have like one way to finish the game and you need it to live or something like that. Not a spot you want to be in. I'm going to give this a D. Okay, up next. Military Discipline. For a 1 mana, it is an enchantment aura flash. Enchant creature. When military discipline enters the battlefield, enchanted creature gains first strike until end of turn. Enchanted creature gets +1/+0. Okay, now this is a combat trick. This is reasonable. It's not gigantic. I'm still gonna rate it pretty low, maybe like a D plus. Just because it's like fairly low impact, it will allow you, but between the +1/+0 and then the first strike, it will allow you to win specific combats and especially trades, right? Like, you know, anything that's like even like in the realm of close, it allows you to win that interaction. But the first strike only lasts until end of turn. The joke with this card is it leaves the +1/+0 behind. Like after you use the trick, then it's permanently +1/+0. It's not bad, especially for a single white mana. Maybe this is like a C minus, you know, but my contention with it is it doesn't help you unless your creature is already reasonably sized, unlike something like a giant growth or something like that, or a furious bellow from the last set where it adds like a lot of stats, like +3/+0. It's adding like 3 power to your creature. It just doesn't help your creature like trade up. It already has to be like reasonable or close to winning the fight against whatever it's fighting against anyways. And so it doesn't, what this doesn't do, and this is what you really want your combat tricks to do more than just trade, is it's not very good at pushing you through like a fat blocker. Like you have a bunch of 2/2s and 3/3s, and then your opponent plays like a 4/5, right? You really want to be able to add a lot of power to your creature to be able to smash through that. And then usually either first strike or additional toughness helps your creature survive the combat. This doesn't really do that. You know, if your opponent plays a 4/5 on that board I just described, you still kind of can't attack, and military discipline doesn't help you out there, which is not where I want something as situational as my combat trick to be. So I think maybe it's like a D plus. Um, Also because again this is going to be extremely contextual within the set, but it looked like, I mean, you know, I seen creatures like, okay, I mean, we have Phalanx Vanguard here is 2 mana 2/2, you know, cards range from this size all the way to like 9/9s and stuff, you know, so it's like it just doesn't seem like there's actually going to be like a lot of like close combats, some, but it's not like the kind of set where everything's like really flat, where like the highest power and toughness is like up to 5 and then everything is like kind of in between there. It's like there's going to be small guys, there's going to be huge monsters. You want something that pushes through a little bit better than that. So I don't think that this card's going to be extremely strong unless it has like some synergies that I'm missing. Okay, Phalanx Vanguard. It is a white and 1 human soldier creature, 2/2 with vigilance, and whenever an artifact enters the battlefield under your control, Phalanx Vanguard gets +1/+0 until end of turn. Well, this would be a good role player. This is probably like a C or C minus, but something that you won't be sad to have in your like aggressive white decks. It actually does like push pretty good. because if you know there are some cards that make like multiple power stones. When your 2-drop creature is attacking for 4 power, that's pretty good. That's pretty good. And this is like kind of nasty to race too, because you know, say you make 2 artifacts in a turn, this attacks as a 4/2, and then you know they have the choice to like either like, and they have like a 3/4 or something. It's like, well, they can't really they don't really want to block and trade their creature down, but then if they don't, like, it can still block your opponent's like small creatures that they have. So it seems reasonable. I don't think it's going to be astounding by any means, unless you can really churn out the artifacts and you can really start like, you know, pressuring with this thing big time. But even if it's just like consistently a 3/2 vigilance, I think it ends up being pretty good. I'm going to say this is probably about a C or C minus. This is how good this card is going to be a real litmus test in the format, in a way of like what the speed actually is. Because if this format really does become about just like trying to slam big robots on the battlefield, and things like this get invalidated quickly and don't really matter, this card could plummet down to the D range, you know. Or if it turns out that like the big robots are like actually really tough to get going, and it's a lot more about like applying a lot of pressure before something that bad can happen, this card could be pretty good. So I think it's probably going to be more the former than the latter. So I'm going to start this as like a C minus maybe. Um, but this is a card worth keeping your eye on, because it'll give you a good sense of how fast the format really is. Okay. Up next, I gotta quit scrolling because I keep blowing by stuff. All right, Power Stone Engineer. It is a white and 1 human artificer creature. It is a 2/1, and when it dies, create a tapped Power Stone token. This is good. This is like the first one where it's like, you know, I've given a lot of caveats like based on like speed and all that kind of stuff. This is the first one where the first Power Stone token, and I just don't know how to evaluate these yet. How good is a single Power Stone token? Probably pretty good, right? Now this creature has to die first, and just being a 2-mana 2/1, it can easily do that. There's a lot of like 1/1 tokens in multiple colors. Um, so I'm gonna guess that this card is like fairly weak, unless you really, really want the Power Stones. This might be a good role player in decks that are trying to churn out giant robots, and you just need something early to defend yourself with. That's kind of where I see its best use case. Your opponent is attacking you, you're under pressure, but you play this as a 2-power creature, you trade it off with their 2-drop, and now you have a Power Stone token, and you've done all right for yourself. It's probably like a C in that case. If you were trying to pressure with this though, it's probably a lot worse. A 2/1 just doesn't really do a whole lot, and then you know you have the Power Stone, but if you're an aggressive deck, how much are you going to use that Power Stone? Well, that remains yet to be seen. That's where this gets tricky to evaluate. I'm going to say if you were an aggressive deck, this is probably on the low end. It's probably like a D plus or a C minus. If you effectively block your opponent's 2-drop and you're trying to turn on a big robot, well, it's probably like a solid C. It's probably like a solid C, but it's going to be, I think it's going to be within there. All right, we have Prison Sentence. It's an aura. Enchant creature. When Prison Sentence enters the battlefield, scry 2. Enchanted creature can't attack or block, and its activated abilities can't be activated. Okay, so it's an arrest with a scry on it. Well, this has to be really good, right? I'm going to say that this is probably like a B. Yeah, I would say so. You know, arrests are generally just good enough as it is. You know, cards like with the exile type removal, you know, things like Citizen's Arrest, things like, you know, Oblivion Ring or whatever, you know, they are not too functionally different from this. Sometimes the abilities that the creatures have are static, and it actually is a problem that the creature remains on the battlefield. That can be a thing. But a lot of the time, all the creature does is attack or block or activate abilities, and this shuts that all down with a double scry on top of your removal spell. I would say that this is a solid B. Probably not a B plus, because again, the creature remaining on the battlefield does mean that it's awkward against some threats. Also, this is, I was talking about Disenchant earlier. Everybody's going to be playing their Disenchants. So Prison Sentence is going to be kind of going the same way that like the white enchant removal in Dominator United went, where, you know, it was kind of a victim of Destroy Evil being so ubiquitously good. Disenchant is going to be so good that your disenchants might get pointed at these removal spells, and the fact that the creature isn't exiled means that there could be huge blowouts where you disenchant Prison Sentence, and then the creature is either immediately attacking or blocking or activating its abilities. Um, so this is probably, but that's just disenchant, you know. Um, I'm just saying, like, be on the lookout for that, because this is going to be a victim to that card. Overall, though, I think it's a solid B. Solid removal spell, couple big scry on it, has some narrowness and awkwardness to it, so it's not like a B plus or A minus type removal spell. But yeah, solid B. All right, we have Recommissioned. Return target artifact or creature card with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. It's a sorcery. If a creature enters the battlefield this way, it enters with an additional +1/+1 counter on it. Okay, so this card is interesting. Um, I think I like it. There is a little tiny self-mill theme in this set, and if you can get something into the graveyard, or if you just trade a creature off early, this actually becomes kind of nice because it kind of becomes a mana positive play. So one thing that I really want to point out, and I think there's a couple of these, but I'll just kind of talk about it here with this one. When you have reanimator type effects, which is what this is, return from the graveyard to the battlefield, it's really important that you get some kind of win there. What do I mean by that? Well, if you are, like, say you just like return a 2-drop and then it just doesn't get the +1/+1 counter on it. Okay, now that's what this card reads, but just bear with me. Okay, it's like you return a 2-drop creature and you spent 2 mana on this and you get your 2-drop back. You didn't pick up a win. In fact, you're kind of losing on that exchange, even though that exchange, like right there in that moment, was even the 2 mana for the 2 mana creature, and it's like I got exactly my mana value's worth. The problem is this card has a fail state where it rots in your hand. And so, if you don't have a creature that is an acceptable target for this, or an artifact, and this does hit artifacts, that should be mentioned too. Um, if you do not have a target for this, it just rots in your hand. So when you do have a target for this, you need to be picking up some kind of a win. Does that make sense? And so this has 2 wins on it. One, well, three actually. So one, it can get a mana value 3 or less, so it can give you an additional mana by getting like a 3 mana spell with your 2 mana, so you get a mana efficiency. And it has the 1/1 counter on it, so even if you got the 2 mana spell back, it's a little bit stronger than the 2 mana version of it would have been otherwise. So that's 2 wins. And then the third win is kind of a loose one, but is selection. If you have like 3 different targets for this, you get to pick which one you want. And so this can be 3 different cards in a way. And so selection is somewhat of a win. I think it's a bit of an overrated one in a lot of cards, but it is a win there. So those are the 3 wins that you could pick up. And that's your reward for the fail state of not having a target. Okay. I think that this one is decent enough because it should be easy enough to like trade off a 2-drop creature and then play this on that same 2-drop creature, and you've just played for 2 mana a better version of that 2-drop creature, and that's decent. And or you could just mill something, but you could also like get the mana advantage of having like a 3 mana creature, like the 3 mana 1/1 flyer that I forget the name of it already. I'm so sorry. But that's a really good target for this card, right? Because now you might draw another card, because actually it's a really good target for this because that card mills 3, and then it's a great target for this on its own, and then it'll mill more. So if you have like more of these, you probably don't want to play too many of them. I'm gonna say it is a C in a deck well set up to support it. It could be. The thing is, I don't ever see this being like a C plus because the win is just never that big. It's always just like decent. Okay, is that I think it's gonna be just kind of a solid C. I just don't see it like because the mana value is limited. I don't ever see you being like, oh yeah, I did it, got there. This card just doesn't have that same level of power to it. But it's just kind of like a nice little like value added 2 mana spell. C, maybe C plus if you really do it. All right, Survivor of Corliss, 1 mana, a 1/1 human soldier creature with first strike. Exile Survivor of Corliss from your graveyard. Scry 2. Boy, I can't get behind this card unless you have like a lot of synergies. And maybe I'm missing some of them, but I just haven't seen anything yet. I mean, you could add the 1/1 counter from the 5 mana flyer, but like that's so late in the game. A 1 mana 1/1 first strike is just it's so small that the first strike hardly matters. Like you need to be able to make this thing bigger to do anything. There are a bunch of like 1/1 soldier tokens that your opponent can make, and so like this like fights all of those pretty good. It just like one by one just pokes each one of them to death if they're trying to like attack into you with it. But like that seems like um a really loose case for this for an entire card. And then when it dies, you can get a scry 2. That's not nothing. I mean, that's almost draw a card kind of. So maybe I'm underrating this a little bit, but it's like gosh, it's like closer to just like cycling at that point, but it's not even cycling, because the 1 mana 1/1 first strike, you have to work to make this a reasonable creature. There are like a couple of 1 toughness creatures, like there was the Power Stone Engineer or whatever that card's called. I'm going to be so bad at the names. I'm so sorry. Um, but I think most of the time, all this is going to do is get outclassed, die, and then allow you to scry to, which is kind of not quite getting your card back. This looks like a D minus to me, barring like very specific synergies or something like that. All right, Union of the Third Path. All right, draw is a 3 mana instant, a white and 2. Draw a card, then you gain life equal to the number of cards in your hand. So all this does is cycle and gain you some life. I already don't like this. If all this does is cycle and gain you life, the only time that something like this is acceptable, really, is if the format is like quite slow. I guess it can, like in the early game, gain you like 6 life. Maybe if you haven't like cast anything yet. Maybe, so maybe it's actually a little bit better than I thought. But it's like kind of a terrible top deck, though it does just cycle as well. I gotta chew on this a little bit. So this one is like really interesting based on the speed of the format. So I know I just said a bunch there, but like here's where I'm torn. If the format's like fairly slow, then you have a little bit more time to waste 3 mana doing this, right? But then you care about your life total a little bit less. Like you're not under so much pressure that putting this 3 mana cycle gain a couple of life points card in your deck is like all that exciting, especially because like the slower the format is, the more cards you're going to see of your deck over time, and the more chance you're going to have to play out your whole hand. And so all of that put together is the more likely you are to just like find this card off of the top of your deck like on turn like 12 or whatever when you've played out your whole hand, and it becomes like 3 mana cycle gain 1 or whatever. That's really bad. That's really bad. Like you're just wasting your mana at that point. In a really fast format, you don't have as much time to just screw around with like, hey, a white and 2, um, you know, gain some, like don't affect the board, just draw a card, and then you gain some life, which the gain life is good if it's in a fast format and you're like under a lot of pressure, but you basically just like lose that life to getting attacked back because you're not defending yourself. It like really limits how much life you're actually gaining when you cast this. This looks like an F to me. I think that this is an F. Um, there's a world where things are exactly the right speed where it's like, no, it's actually good to just cycle this and you gain like 4, and it's not too slow to be doing that, and but the life points actually matter. I'm going to start this as an F. I don't want to put this card in my deck. All right, Warlord's Elite. It is a white and 2 4/4 human soldier. As an additional cost to cast this spell, tap 2 untapped artifacts, creatures, and/or lands you control. I like how it says lands you control because you could technically make this a 5 mana 4/4. That's like kind of cute in a way. It's like, yeah, listen, you can just cast it with lands if you want. Oh, that's kind of nice. I think this card is actually, it's like a synergy piece, but I actually think it's going to be kind of good. I think it's like on the C plus range. I think it's on the C plus range because if you do make Power Stones, or if you just like make some extra soldiers, this allows you to like kind of get ahead and make a mana efficient play in your aggro decks. A 3 mana 4/4 is like reasonable. It's not insane or anything, but I think this will actually play pretty good in a lot of decks when you do like kind of go wide a little bit, or if you have these other Power Stones lying around. I already can guess that there's going to be some amount of tension in the ambush aeronaut or whatever that card is called. Actually makes me think of the same thing too, where like, so a good number of cards create Power Stones, right, which those are only going to be useful to activate abilities or cast like artifact spells. So they can help accelerate your game plan if you have like a bunch of like artifacts in your hand, or again, how do I want to say this? If you are an aggro deck, you are much less likely to have big expensive robots in your hand that you want to cast, okay? Because you're not going to want to cast like a 9 mana robot in your like a deck that's trying to like close the game out with like a bunch of aggressive creatures. And yet, your cards might be making Power Stones. What do you do with these Power Stones if you aren't casting big, huge robots? Well, a few things. One, maybe you have some like not big, huge robots, like you have some like other medium sized or smaller sized ones, and it allows you to have like a nice double spell turn where it's like, okay, you cast like another creature, and like one of your like cheaper artifact spells on the cheap, and you have like a really sick double spell turn and really get ahead of your opponent. That's one thing you can do with Power Stones. You can activate the abilities of your creatures, like the Ambush Aeronaut, and you kind of like fuel the abilities that help you apply pressure. That's another thing you can do with them. Or you can cast a card like this, and this it'll actually like help cast these guys. So I think it's actually going to be kind of nice uh, in your white aggressive white decks to be able to use those power stones that you might be making incidentally that you might not want otherwise is kind of what I'm getting at. It's possible that the power stones kind of go to waste the more aggressive your deck is, but this kind of prevents them from going to waste. Same with Ambush Aeronaut. So I think it's like a C plus in that regard. And then also just being like a cheap 4/4 that like if say you're a more defensive white deck and you are planning on casting like the Grobots later in the game, well, allowing the power stones that you're making earlier in the game to allow you to make a mana efficient play that defends you pretty well seems decently strong. So I think this lands in like the C plus range. Also, again, if you make some like soldier tokens, you have some 1/1s that can't attack yet. Just mana positive plays that allow you to use your other resources that might not be able to be used that efficiently in the moment to make a mana positive play is really kind of nice. I think these guys are a C plus. Not insane or anything, but in most decks, you'll be able to cheat them out a little bit. I think that's kind of good. I think that's kind of good. All right. Last white common, Yoshin Medic. It's a 3 mana, 1/4 human cleric soldier with lifelink. Okay. 3 mana, 1/4 is fine. This beats the snot out of soldier tokens. They could just never attack into it, basically. Like, it's just, they can't trade with it. It eats one, blanks another one. Decent role player, probably like a C minus range. Well, maybe a C. If this can like attack for free all the time, like there's just like not enough like 4 power creatures that can actually kill it, that could be kind of annoying. Like you could just like continuously ping for one. A 3 mana 1/4 isn't like a high impact body though. The lifelink's okay. If you could pump this up, it is notably a soldier, so it gets the 1/1 counter from like the 3/4 flyer. That's you put a 1/1 counter on this thing, a 2/5 lifelink. That's annoying. That's an annoying creature to attack into. Um, but overall, it's pretty low impact. I'm gonna say that this is probably like a C minus, but it has the ability to have, because of the lifelink, it has the potential to have interesting synergies. Okay, so that was the white commons. Let's go for the uncommons. Okay, let's do the uncommons. So first we have Calamity's Wake. It is an instant for a white and one. Exile all graveyards. Players can't cast non-creature spells this turn. Exile Calamity's Wake. Well, this looks like an F to me. There might be actually some like sideboard reasons to play this. If your opponent has like a lot of, and it looks like there's a reasonable number of graveyard effects, including, actually, let me back up. There's a lot of Unearth in this set, and so maybe this actually, against some decks, turns into like discard multiple cards, kind of. Um, but, it's only kind of, because depending on the Unearth creature, um, the creature gets sacrificed in a turn anyway, so sometimes the Unearth is not a full card, is kind of what I'm getting at. Um, so this looks like it could be like a sideboard C, um, but I wouldn't main deck this, that's for sure. It's too spotty, again, it hits a couple of the reanimate spells, especially because it's instant speed, so you can like actually like eat their spell. You could be reanimate cards with it, but it just seems too risky to play in the main deck. And then your opponent really does have to have a critical mass of these things going on, like kind of like I was talking about with like the removal words. Like just having a target isn't good enough. If your opponent's playing like one reanimate spell, this is not good enough. Like it beats that one card and like that's it. Like that's not amazing. Maybe you get an Unearth card too, but also maybe they don't draw either of those, and you have this silly Calamity's Wake. The players can't cast non-creature spells this turn. It's really hard to imagine like actually using this effectively, like because if they have any instance that they want to play on your turn, like say you like do this at the start of your turn because you want to like protect your creatures from their spells or something like that. Well, they would just cast their instance at that point if they think that they need to, so that doesn't really help. You could try to cast it on their turn, but you'd just have to be like guessing that they have sorceries that they want to cast on their turn. They can still do the same thing with the instance on their turn, and then like yeah, maybe they have like some sort of like sorcery removal that they want to use, but you have to like have like something that you want to protect for sure, and then they have like a sorcery and you just like guess right that they have it, and then you like use it, and then you discard this card, and then they're like, I guess I'll use it next turn. Like if it's just the clause on that just doesn't do anything in limited, really. It doesn't. So basically you'd only be using it to beat graveyard synergy cards. It does that okay. This is definitely a sideboard card, and when I that's big asterisk on that, only if they have a ton of effects that want you to, or that are trying to use the graveyard. Just one or two ain't good enough. It ain't good enough. So it's like a sideboard like C minus, unless your opponent's like really going off. Then I guess this can own them. You'll know when you want to use this, and it's not like just maybe, you know. Um, Otherwise, it's an F. Don't play it. Great Desert Prospector. It is a 5 mana for white and 4 human artificer creature, 3/2. When Great Desert Prospector enters the battlefield, create a tapped Power Stone token for each other creature you control. Okay, so this card is definitely a build around. And it's kind of a build around in two directions. You want to have both other creatures that you're playing, and then also a use for the Power Stones. Um, if you're doing that, this is like a build around B minus, maybe even a B. Um, you really want to be doing the thing that it's asking though. Like I kind of mentioned this before, some decks just aren't going to have a huge use for Power Stones. And so this becomes like not that amazing. And let me be really clear about that too. Having a big use for Power Stones, I mentioned like the double spell turn. Like if you have like a couple like a bunch of cheap artifacts in your deck and you can like do like the double spells, that's not bad. That's not really what this card is good at doing though. This card is like helping you cast like the big ones, like the big artifacts, or like activate the abilities on permanents. Because if you do like have a bunch of cheaper ones, you've probably like run them out of your hand already. It's going to be difficult for this card to let you have like a big double spell turn that's like really impactful. If it's like you play like a bunch of creatures, you play this, you get a bunch of Power Stones, and then you just have like a couple of cheap cards still in your hand, maybe you might have been able to cast them both anyways, you know. So like all that to say, it's either you really want to be using it to churn out the abilities of your creatures or to cast like something big. If you were doing that, this card is actually decent, but it requires a lot of setup, so it's like a build around B, maybe B minus. But you really want to be using like both parts of it. If you get like one Power Stone with this, a 5 mana 3/2 is just not a good creature size. You really want to be getting there with the ability, right? It's just a really anemic creature. I mean, a 3 mana 3/2 is an anemic creature. So, like a 5 mana 3/2, really anemic creature. You really want to be getting there. One Power Stone probably in it. Two Power Stones, you're kind of doing it. Three, and you got something to do with them. Okay, you've kind of done it a little bit, you know, but that's the territory you want to be. Definitely a build around. I don't think that this is going to be a high pick. Kind of the same deal. Like, you're gonna want it. You're gonna know when you want this card, and it's gonna be when you have big expensive things to cast, but then also are playing other creatures alongside it, and this will help set that up. Or you have like really important activated abilities in your deck. And again, more than just one ambush aeronaut is not going to cut it. Like even though you can like really go off and maybe double activate the pump or whatever, if you only have like one or two targets like cards that are useful with it, this just doesn't do enough. Like you really need to want the Power Stones, and then it's okay to play this 3/2 that makes a bunch of Power Stones for 5 mana. Okay, Lay Down Arms. It is a sorcery for 1 white. Exile target creature with mana value less than or equal to the number of planes you control. Its controller gains 3 life. Yeah, one thing I like about this set is it kind of like has all these like really quiet nods to older, more busted cards that are like fixed versions of the cards. This is the Swords to Plowshares, right? Um, this card is decent. It's definitely not an aggro removal spell, right? Like if you're like trying to like attack your opponent to death, first of all, you know, you want to play these like even though it's like really mana efficient, um, you know, getting rid of their small creature but giving them life is like not an amazing exchange if you're trying to attack them to death anyways. Like you probably just want another card and you just trade whatever you're attacking with and all that, and it's fine. I mean, maybe, but the 3 life really hurts if you're trying to like pressure your opponent. Whereas if you're trying to stay alive, it's actually pretty decent. It does ask you to play like a bunch of planes. This is kind of what I'm talking about. This set seems to have a minor monocolor theme, or at least like heavy commitment theme, which is kind of interesting, especially after the last set we have. So I'm kind of curious to see how that plays out. Um, you know, it's actually like really a high number of planes. I mean, think about it. Like, if you have 3 planes, like you're at 5 mana, and you have like in your split like 3 planes, 2 islands, or whatever, this can kill a 3 drop, and its controller still gains 3 life, and you really have just gained a 2 mana advantage. That's not insane. I think that this is like a B minus in the decks that can cast it, though it might even end up playing worse than that. I'm really curious how well you can support like the monocolor. If you can play like almost monocolor decks, like if you were playing like say you're like playing mono white, this goes way up in value because then on turn 5 you have 5 planes, and then you can like beat their 5 drop creature for a single mana, and it's like they gain 3, but like okay, especially if you're a defensive deck, you don't care about the 3 life, right? And so if you're like a monocolored defensive deck, this card's like a B plus, like it's amazing. If you're a multicolor deck, or even like, and by multicolor I even just mean like 2 color deck, its stock starts to go way down. You know, it's a lot easier. again, if you've watched my content, I'm obsessed with mana colors. Like your colors will betray you more than I think most people will give it credit for. Like just for anything over anything. Like cards that even like have like triple weight in their casting cost or whatever. Like those like are so much more difficult to cast even if you're just a straight up two color deck than you might think. You'll draw your one white source and your four of your other sources, and you'll be like, wow, I still need two more of this source to cast this card that I have, and I'm only a two color deck. It happens all the time. That's just the way it goes. um and this card is kind of like that. It's asking you to play a bunch of planes before it's a good card. If you're doing that, it's a very good card. If you're not, it really goes way down in stock. It's like it becomes like a D. So like again, if you're doing it, you're doing the thing all the way up to B plus. If you're not, very poor. So just keep that in mind. All right, we have Lauren, Disciple of History, is a for a white and three, it's a legendary human artificer 3/3 creature. Whenever Lauren, Disciple of History, or another legendary creature enters the battlefield under your control, return target artifact card from your graveyard to your hand. This card is pretty excellent. There's a number of legends. Now, you'll want to support it, but what I like about this card is like it doesn't actually need the support of other legends. It just goes off if you do it, because the 4 mana 3/3, like, and then buy back an artifact from your graveyard is already a decent enough card. You'll, of course, want to set that up, but there's like a bunch of there's a bunch of ways for artifacts to die. So, really, it's just super simple to get the 4 mana 3. It's like 4 mana 3/3 draw a card with selection. So right there on its face, it's really good. And then if you're able to get other legends in your deck, if you get like multiple cards off of this, you've really done it. It's really excellent. I would say that this is like a B. This is like a B, maybe a B minus. If you have no other legends, it's like a B minus. Because I mean it's not like insane or anything, but like it's a super strong card, 3/3 draw card, excellent. Really happy with that. Um, it does have to get into the graveyard, which is why I call it a B minus instead of a B. It requires like a little bit of a setup. If it was just like 4 mana 3/3 draw a card, that's like a solid B. The yeah, needing the graveyard synergy makes it, you got to work for it a little bit more. B minus, but like if you have like a couple more legends in your deck, this goes up to like B plus. Like that's great. Maybe even like, yeah, well, no, A minus is like pushing it a little bit, but like yeah, you just cast like one other legend with this, you get two artifacts back. You really are standing a good chance to win the game. So I really like this card. I'm just gonna put it like solid B. But you want to try to pick up other legends, and of course you need to make sure you have the artifacts to make it work. So, but good card, good card. All right, here we have Mass Production. It is a sorcery for a white and 5. Create 4/1/1 colorless soldier artifact creature tokens. Well, this is tough to rate. I really, really underrated Imperial Oath in Neon Kamigawa. Now, Imperial Oath put more power on the board. It was 3/2/2s, so it was like 6 power and toughness over 3 bodies instead of 4, power and toughness over 4 bodies. And it had a big scry on it, so not only would you like cast it and like take control of the board, but then it would set up your game afterwards. This I think is a lot weaker than Imperial Oath. Um, but it's not bad, especially if you have like a lot of things to do with the artifact creatures, or if you have a lot of things to that care about the go wide with the creatures, or if you care about the artifacts. That said, I still think that this is only going to be like a C plus, maybe. 6 mana is really expensive, and this does not do what I want a 6 mana spell to do, like close the game out. Either make it so that I'm like I'm unkillable, or I'm just like really swinging the board in my favor against my opponent. It's like a synergy card. I wouldn't just run this. Like, say I had nothing that cared about going wide, and I had nothing that cared about artifacts, which is probably going to be the minority of the time. But still, I wouldn't like this card at all. I wouldn't like this card at all. It'd be like a C minus. It just doesn't do enough for 6 mana. I'm willing to bet that there's enough synergy to go with it that actually this ends up being like okay and more of like the C or C plus range. But it's really not amazing. 6 mana is a lot. And I mean it's not an artifact, so you can't like ramp it out. And yeah, 4/1/1s are fine, but you really want to be doing something with them. It's just pretty unexceptional. It's like a D plus, I think, if you're like not doing anything with the tokens. Then it could be like a C synergy piece. I think it's on the poor side, is my guess. Meticulous Excavation. Now here's a card. It's an enchantment for a single white mana. For a white and 2, activated ability, return target permanent you control to its owner's hand. If it has Unearth, instead exile it, then return the card to its owner's hand. So it gets around the Unearth clause of just it gets removed if it leaves the battlefield. So activate only during your turn. So you can't like be really cheesy and like, well, even on your turn actually you can like save your stuff for removal, but like you can't save your stuff from like your opponent's sorcery speed removal. And it is really smart to put the only during your turn on it because otherwise it'd be really obnoxious. Like you could like perpetually like block your opponent's stuff and then just return the stuff to your hand. You have like infinite blockers. This card is going to be like a build around like B plus, A minus if you're really building around it. I think that this in the right deck, this is semi bomb level. You get a couple power stones going. And especially if you have some of the artifacts that could enter the battlefield effects and a couple power stones, you can just. This is the kind of card that in the right deck, you can just go off with it. And you just can keep rebuying and rebuying and rebuying some kind of effect. And it's going to be a nightmare for your opponent. Again, especially if you cheapen it with power stones so that you're like casting artifacts and using the ability cheaply. Paying 3 mana to like eat your own board presence is a huge cost. Like it's a big cost. So this is like not acceptable in decks that don't have really good things to do with it. But in the right deck, again, you want a bunch of activated abilities. You can't just get away with like a couple because it just ain't going to be worth anything. And you need like ideally like artifacts to do that with and a bunch of power stones to make it way less punishing that you're paying mana to just rebuy your board over and over and over again. But if you can set that up, this thing can probably just machine gun with certain cards. So keep your eye out on this one. I don't think it's going to be a high pick. This feels like the kind of card that you really have to get there with. And so there's this interesting tension when it comes to build arounds that it really depends on the set, on the specific card, and personal taste, whether you pick this card like first and then try to make the deck happen, or you end up like picking cards that will go well in a deck like this, and then you see this card and you're like, it's time. I tend to fall into the latter category. It's just kind of my style. But there's an argument to be made for like picking this early and trying to make it happen because when you get there it can really go off. It can really go off. So like build around like B plus, but you really got to get there with the build around, both in having ETBs and I imagine power stones and artifacts to make this not as punishing. Recruitment officer. This is my kind of card, though I have a feeling that this isn't the set for it, but I bet you it's all right. So it is a creature, a 1 mana, 2/1 human soldier creature. For a three and a white, look at the top 4 cards of your library. You may reveal a creature card with mana value 3 or less from among them and put it into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. Okay, so this card, I've talked about this a number of times, but I really can't overstate it enough. It's really important for some decks, especially for decks that are wanting to play cards like this, aggro decks, to have things to do with the incidental power stones that you're going to be making on some of your cards anyways. Having these activated abilities like this really make a big difference of whether your power stones are valuable or not. Because 3 and a white for this is actually for this ability is actually really expensive. But if you're like using these power stones that you wouldn't be using for like other things anyways, if you're not trying to cast spells with them or whatever, and this only costs like a white, it's actually really, really good. So this is like a build around B minus maybe. The reason I say it's a B minus, so white a 1 mana 2/1 in limited, they can be okay. If you have a really aggressive deck, those are pretty good. They tend to get blanked pretty quick, the 1 mana 2/1s, and there's a 1/1 token theme in this set. So I think that this is actually going to be a poor attacker, which is why I'm rating it kind of low. It might even be like in the C plus range. However, this ability can go off. It can just draw like a bunch of cards off of it. However, the power of those cards are limited by how many creatures of mana 3 or less you have in your deck, and you have to really have a lot for this actually to be decent. It's only top 4 cards. I imagine you miss on this ability a lot depending on the makeup of your deck. So if you're a really aggressive deck that's making power stones anyways, this could be decent. This could be like, like a B minus maybe, because it's like it attacks for a couple turns, and then once it like no longer can attack, it actually starts recruiting instead of attacking and like finding you more gas as you go into the game. That's pretty good. If you don't have the ability to like spend a bunch of mana on this, like 4 mana, like I said, is a ton. Because imagine you're paying full 4 mana for this. Well, to even like play the creature that you're drawing after you activate the 4 mana, you need 7 mana. That's a lot. That's a ton for an aggro deck. And you really only want this in an aggro deck because it's a 1 mana 2/1 and it's only finding creatures 3 or less. So you really, again, it's like a lot of these cards seem to need a lot of like things to line up correctly for them to be good. And once you're doing them, they're decent, but I'm a little skeptical. So I bet you this card's going to be like a C. and it can get up to like a C plus or maybe a B minus if you're like really doing the thing. But I think most of the time the 2/1 body is probably just not going to be good enough, and the ability is going to be a little bit too slow, and it's going to miss too often. That this card is likely more of a miss than it is a hit, but in certain decks it will go off. All right. Now here's a card, Repair and Recharge. It is a sorcery for 2 white and 3. Return target artifact, enchantment, or planeswalker card from your graveyard to the battlefield. Create a tapped Power Stone token. Okay, this actually is kind of what I was talking about, like with whatever the 2-mana sorcery was. This one really breaks that because there are giant monsters in this set. There are 10 mana, 9 mana creatures. There are gigantic beasties that you want to get into the graveyard. So this actually can be a very powerful spell in this set, I think. Again, you want to be doing the thing. You want to like maybe there's a number of cards that mill, and you want to have like the big powerful creatures to get back. But once you do that, you can really cheat something out here. Like you can get a huge thing, and it makes a Power Stone token, and it'll help you fuel abilities and things like that, which is kind of nice. You've kind of already done it at that point in that like you say you use this on like a 10-mana artifact creature. Well, the Power Stone is like you already got your 10-mana creature. Like, what are you doing? You know, I mean, it has abilities and stuff on it, maybe. So like, it's not useless, that's for sure. So I think that again, this is like a synergy card in the right deck. This is probably like a B, and it can like really go off. This is going to cheat some huge monsters into play sometimes in this set. You do want to be doing the thing like you want to have enough artifacts. Or enchantments, though I don't know how many enchantments are going to be going to the graveyard. Though honestly, because some of the white removal is enchantment based, this could also like just like buy back a removal spell, and that's okay. You're probably like if you use this to bring back the arrest, what is it called, like prison sentence or whatever, I can't remember. It's like you can overpay for your removal spells a little bit sometimes because they're so important to like deal with problem permanents that like if you like that's a 3-mana enchantment. If you spend 5 mana to get back the 3-mana enchantment and then make the Power Stone, I wouldn't call that a win, but it's like that's like good selection. Like that's like important. Like if you got to do that, so like that's actually kind of nice. Probably won't do the Planeswalker thing too much. I would say that this is like a B minus in the right, but then like in the right deck, like it could actually be like a really critical piece. But in a lot of decks, I'd probably put this at like a B minus. Like you're probably going to have big enough artifact creatures in a lot of your decks that like this actually is like a reasonable card to be casting. Up next we have Static Net. This card seems really good. A white and 3 enchantment. When Static Net enters the battlefield, exile target non-land permanent an opponent controls until Static Net leaves the battlefield. When Static Net enters the battlefield, you gain 2 life and create a tap Power Stone token. What doesn't this card do? So it's target non-land permanent. So it's not even a creature. It removes problem enchantments. It removes problem artifacts. Everything. It hits everything. And it exiles it, so like you don't have to worry about it anymore. Of course, I mean it's like vulnerable to enchantment removal, but okay. And then it also gains you life and gives you mana. Like this card is incredible. I think this is a B plus. This is a really strong removal spell. It's just a catch-all for everything. It's not even that expensive. It's only 4 mana for like a card that gets everything, and like puts your life total, like it pads your life total a little bit, and helps you cast your like giant monsters afterwards. B plus, incredible removal spell. I think this card's really strong. All right, Thopter Architect. It is a white and 3 human artificer creature, and it's a 2/3. Whenever an artifact enters the battlefield under your control, target creature gains flying until end of turn. I think that this is a pretty good aggro card. White and 3, 2/3, that's pretty small. It's just like no stats on that, no abilities. Okay, that's pretty poor. But if you have like creatures that you're trying to get through, like casting this and then following it up with artifacts actually presents like a lot of offense. It's probably like a C plus. It could end up being really pivotal for the white aggro decks, but even if it is, like it's still that there's kind of a lot going on here. Like you could just draw this and none of your good artifacts, and it just is a 4-mana 2/3. That's a pretty poor fail state. That's pretty bad, which kind of really limits the power of this. Even though there are times where it's like you'll play this and then you'll play the sorcery that makes 4/1/1 soldiers, and you'll like lift your whole team to the skies and alpha them in the air, and it's like it looks incredible, the fail states on this is pretty huge. You'll make some incidental Power Stone tokens, and that's where it like really shines, is when you're like playing other cards that just happen to make a Power Stone, and then so it's like your creatures just kind of incidentally get flying. But even if you're like playing like other artifact beaters, like that could be pretty good. So I think it's like a C plus. about like it's going to be a solid role player in your aggro decks, but it has a decent fail state, and if you're not attacking, it's really really poor. Um, so yeah, C plus in your aggro decks, much worse than that in your control decks. Okay, let's see. Let's move on to the rares. Okay, our first. Oh, what happened there? Oh, I think I refreshed the page. That's right. So, all right, our first rare is In the Trenches. It is an enchantment for 2 white and 1. Creatures you control get +1/+1. And then for a white and 5, exile target non-land permanent you don't control until In the Trenches leaves the battlefield. Activate only as a sorcery and only once. This card seems incredible. Saw a couple people ask on this on Mythic Spoiler, like, why is this a Mythic? Yeah, I guess I can see that. It doesn't feel super mythic, but I think it's mythic in strength, kind of like. So this aura is going to be, or Anthem. I'm sorry, Anthem is going to be incredible. There's a lot of 1/1s. There's a lot of random 1/1s. There's a lot of smaller creatures. Just Anthems in general are pretty strong. And this one also turns into a removal spell. One of the toughest things about playing an aggro deck is that sometimes you just get blocked by a big fatty. That's really really annoying. This not only like amps your whole team to give you way better attacks, but then when your opponent does finally like slam down a blocker that could stabilize the game for them, oh actually, JK, no it doesn't. You just exile it, and you can pay for that with Power Stones. This card's incredible. This is like an A minus, I think. It's just going to be so pivotal for your go wide white decks that like if you like are playing the go wide, not even the go wide. Like if you just have like a bunch of beaters and then you play this, I imagine it's going to be really hard for your opponent to win the game. Like all your creatures get better, and then you just eat their best thing on top of that, all in one card. Just don't get it disenchanted. Otherwise, yeah, I think this is an A minus. All right, Kayla's Command. It is a sorcery for 2 white and 1. Choose 2 because it's a rare command. Create a 2/2 colorless construct artifact creature token. Put a +1/+1 counter on a creature you control. It gains double strike until end of turn. Search your library for a basic plains card, reveal it, put it into your hand, then shuffle, and you gain 2 life and scry 2. Well, these are always tough to rate, anyways. Just based on having so many options. I think it's like a B or perhaps a B minus. So I think that most often you're going to be making a 2/2 and then putting a +1/+1 counter on something and giving a double strike. And it probably is not going on the construct, which means you want another creature in play. So like it pumps in your dudes and enables a good attack while also putting a 2/2 on the battlefield. That's not insane. That's like B minus territory. It's not like it just like it doesn't crush the game. It doesn't like super swing it in your favor. There could be situations where that's really annoying, like if you have a good flyer on the field and then you give it +1/+1 and double strike, and then also like make a 2/2. Like that's pretty wild. It helps you race a little bit. Like if you want to do the gain 2 and scry 2, like that's okay. But like that's not a huge effect. Like it's like a little bit of life, and then you get to like maybe set up your draw in the future. And then if you really need to, you can find another planes, depending on I guess what the state is. Like maybe you're at 3 mana. But like even like imagine like okay, you create a 2/2, and then you like search your library for a planes, and it costs double white and 1. That's like the worst Borderland Ranger you've ever cast because it like costs a double color of the same mana, and it can only find a planes. It can't even fix for you. So I think that this is like a B minus. It doesn't slam the game closed or anything like that, um, but it does like a bunch of decent stuff well enough that like no matter what 2 options you pick, like the rate's going to be okay. I suppose search your library for a planes and then gain 2 scry 2. Like that's a pretty poor card overall. Basically, I don't see you like yeah. I really do think it's going to be make the 2/2, put the +1/+1 counter on something and give it double strike, unless you really really need to do one of these other options. Like you were just hard up for a land, or you were like digging for something to save you, or you need the life to save you. Overall, I think it's like a B minus, a reasonable card, but not like incredible or anything like that. Kayla's Reconstruction. Triple white and X. Look at the top 7 cards of your library. Put up to X artifact and or creature cards with mana value 3 or less from among them onto the battlefield. Put the rest at the bottom of your library in a random order. So there seems to be a big like 3 or less theme in white. So I think you're really going to want to lean into that, which I didn't realize there were that many of those in this set. And it kind of makes you want to go back and like I'm not going to do this, but go back and like reevaluate like all of the white cards that are 3 mana or less, all the white creatures are 3 mana or less, because they seem to have like way more additional value than like the 4 mana creatures. Even if the 4 mana creature is like a little bit better, so many of your creatures, so many of your spells care about them being 3 mana or less that I think like on balance, like a 3 mana creature is going to be way more important than a 4 mana creature because it just interacts with all of your other creature or all your other spells. So what you cast this for like 4. It's also going to really the other thing is like a lot of them really want you to have a big critical mass of them too. It's not like you just like want one or two, like because like you cast this, if you have a couple of like 3 or less creatures like in your deck or artifacts. I keep saying creatures, but artifacts go in there too. Okay. Um, if you have like a couple, like that's okay, but like imagine you cast this for 7 and you get like one 3-drop creature and one 2-drop creature. It's not very good, is it? Now maybe you can like really, you get a bunch of power stones and you just really you cast this for like 10 and you get to like, look at the tops or oh no, yeah, because it's look at the top 7 and then like you have to hit for a bunch and then you need and so I guess the X is only like how many of these like you're gonna find. So what you can cast her for 4 and then like if there's like one in the top 7 you get one. You cast her for 5 and there's two in the top 7 you get two of them. Okay, all right. Yeah, I think so sorry if my initial comments were confusing. I kind of misread this initially. So yeah, because it's always look at the top 7. Boy, I just don't think that this is going to be amazing though. Like the more mana you put into it, the more likely that mana is going to go to waste unless you have a deck that's really hitting this. Because yeah, like say you cast this for 10. Well, you're not going to get like 10 mana's worth unless like literally the top 7 cards of your deck are all creatures and artifacts 3 mana or less, right? And so like what the like and to really do it, I think that you'd want to hit 3, right? So you probably want to cast this for 6 at the least, because like you could cast it for 5, hit 2 of them, and I suppose you've kind of done it. You've got like 6 mana worth of stuff, but again, this is another really good example of a card that were like that's kind of not good enough. Like even if you hit 2 creatures or artifacts, converted mana cost 3 or less, and you've cast this for 5, so you've gained a mana. Technically it's a 2-for-1, but because the creatures are like on the smaller side, it's like there's 2-for-1s and then there's 2-for-1s. It's sometimes 2-for-1s are like really big, like you like draw 2 and it's like a removal spell and your bomb or whatever, and sometimes 2-for-1s are 2 creatures converted mana cost 3 or less that are like much more low impact. Does that make sense? um Overall I think this card's like a C+. You can cast it, but even then it's also triple white, and a deck that can cast it, which is going to again, there's like a bit of a monocolored theme in this set, but triple white's still a big cost. You'll want to cast it for at least 6, though 5 is reasonable. If you cast it for 6 and hit 3 cards, you've kind of done it. But it just is asking so much. You got to cast triple white. You got to have a bunch of spells that actually fit the criteria. This is like a build around C plus kind of, but you really got to build around it. I'm not excited about this card. Uh, Lauren of the Third Path is a legendary human artificer 2/1 for a white and 2. It has vigilance, and when Lauren of the Third Path enters the battlefield, destroy up to one target artifact or enchantment. And then it has tap. You and target opponent each draw a card. Okay, so right off the bat, just without the tap ability, I think this card's decent. Destroy up to one target artifact or enchantment. Again, we already talked about there's going to be a bunch of artifacts to kill, so that's really nice. Like this is just like little baby flame tongue Kavu, which is really nice. It's also a 3 mana creature, which, as you talked about, like that's pretty nice. Like finding this off of any of your 3 mana things is going to be really sick because you're going to get this back. When I say 3 mana things, cards that care about 3 or less, you're going to get this back and it's going to blow up an artifact. So like this is actually like kind of a nice rare. And then you and each opponent draw a card. You probably won't be doing that too much, but if you have ways to break that, which can be difficult to know if you do or not, but if you have ways to break the symmetry, that can be decent. That's going to be text that doesn't get used all that often. Um, but overall, even if you just took that part off the card, basically that part of the card is there if the situation comes up where you need it. You're like, I have to find an answer for this thing my opponent's doing right now. So yeah, we'll both get cards because I need to draw my removal spell or something like that. The option's there, and then most of the time, I'm not crazy about it. Um, But yeah, even just like if you took that text off, I think this card would be like kind of a B plus. Being a 3 mana creature, it's also a legend, so it works with the other copy of Lauren. Um, and then yeah, just like Flame Tongue Kabuing the one of your opponent's artifacts. I mean, this can kill gigantic monsters and all kinds of things in this set. So really important. And the enchantment destruction is actually really good too, because we actually have seen a couple of really strong enchantments so far. I wasn't sure how many there'd be. There's already a couple that I'd be really happy to kill that I've seen. A couple removal spells, things like In the Trenches, pretty good. I think this card's like a B plus. All right. Myrrel, Shield of Argive, is a white and 3 human soldier 3/4. During your turn, your opponents can't cast spells or activate abilities of artifacts, creatures, or enchantments. Whenever Myrrel, Shield of Argive attacks, create X 1/1 colorless soldier artifact creature tokens, where X is the number of soldiers you control. Okay, well, if you go off in Soldier Tribal, which is not hard to do, also I think all of like the not all, but most of the creature tokens are soldier tokens. This creates like a gigantic board off of one attack. If you have a couple of soldiers, you have 3 or 4 soldiers, which is a lot, but because they're tokens, you can't end up with that many, and then it just like doubles all of your soldiers off of one attack. You could even suicide this card and it's fine because you could just get a board so wide that like it just kind of doesn't matter. And then if you have some of the effects that like make your go wide like way better, like it creates this insurmountable board. So it seems really good. Even if you don't have like many soldiers, like if you just like play, say you play like a soldier on turn 3, this on turn 4, on the next turn attack, and it makes 2/1/1s. That's pretty good. And if it lives through the turn, you then threaten on the next turn to create 4 more 1/1s, and then on the next turn you threaten to create 8 1/1s. Like this card just like multiplies and goes off. The during your turn um, ability is really kind of nice in like a quiet way. It's not insane or anything like that because your opponent will play around it in some ways. Like, I won't be able to use my removal on their turn, so I will use it on my turn. But there are definitely abilities that they're going to want to use. You can like attack with confidence, knowing you're not going to be surprised. Like if you can just like say like okay, combat tricks. Not that I actually like White's combat tricks look really bad in this set, where typically they have good ones, but like um say you have like some kind of combat trick or something like that. Um, Typically you have to be a little bit afraid of your opponent's open mana because it's like, well, if I go like combat trick on my creature and they just like have like a kill spell for it, like I get blown out, I get 2 for 1 or whatever. You just don't have to be afraid of that at all. So you can kind of like attack with impunity, knowing exactly what's going to happen when you attack with Mural. And it just like it threatens to overwhelm really quickly. The multiplicative factor on this card is if you can get multiple attacks with it, it just wins the game, even if it's not getting through. So this is like an A minus, you know. And if you have a bunch of soldiers, it might even be better than that. You know, it might just be a straight up A. But I think it's like an A minus on its own, just because it threatened it. Again, if you can attack multiple times with it, it threatens to just single handedly win the game. Um, if it's just a 3/4 and you're getting attacked and then it just dies, it doesn't like do all that much, but so it goes. So it could end up in like B plus range. If you have no other soldiers, it's a little bit worse, but not even because again, it's like again you have to attack with it a bunch of times to like really get to start snowballing. But because the potential's there, I'm willing to bet that this is an excellent card. All right, up next, Siege Veteran is a 3 mana for a white and 2 human soldier 2/2. At the beginning of combat on your turn, play a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. And whenever another non-token soldier you control dies, create a 1/1 colorless soldier artifact creature token. Is this an A minus too? Um, Maybe that's a little bit high, but at the beginning of combat of your turn, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. That is a powerful ability on what is already a 3 mana 2/2. It's like it just like, this card is so snowbally. If you just go like 2 drop 3 and then follow this up as 3 drop, you get the counter immediately, and then they don't kill you. It doesn't die immediately. Next turn you get another counter, and then if they do like actually kill, like say it's a soldier and they like manage to kill the soldier that you're building up on, like it like attacks like trades, then you get like another 1/1, you can start doing it again. So then like not only does this like create like a wide board for you as your creatures die, but it also can like really stack your board. Maybe it's only like a B plus because it is a little slow. You do want to have soldiers. If you don't have other soldiers, then like it doesn't really do that much. But there's so many soldiers. This set like has like soldier tribal basically. So not too worried about that. And then yeah, the beginning of combat on your turn, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. The fact that you get it immediately is huge. This card is going to be really obnoxious, really snowbally. It's going to be a big groan if you see your opponent play this in turn 3 and you don't have removal immediately. You are way behind. I'm going to start this at an A minus, I think. It might be a more of a B plus. Towards the late game, it kind of drops off a little bit, but not even really. It still like starts pumping your dudes, and as your guys trade off, it like allows you to maintain a board. Really good card, really super good card. Soul Partition is an instant for a white and one. Exile target non-land permanent. Well, good start. For as long as that card remains exiled, its owner may play it. A spell cast by an opponent this way costs 2 more to cast. Boy, I think that this is like... No, I think this might be an F. This might be an F. I don't know. If you cast this on like a really expensive creature, then there's a world where they never get to play it again. Like you cast this on like one of the 9 mana artifacts and now it costs 11. Like maybe that's like a thing. As a tempo effect, I mean it's like kind of a Doomblade. But if the game like goes on for a couple turns, they just get the card back, and now you're just down a card. They do have to get the mana to get there, and so it's like a little overpriced. So maybe it's like a D minus. But this is like a really, really aggressive card in that like you want to be closing the game out so that they don't have the opportunity to just like recast it with impunity, to find the mana in order to do so. It doesn't hurt them that bad to like cast. Like if you're playing this like in a control deck, this is not a control card, right? Because if you like try to like remove some critical threat with it, they'll just eventually like recast it. It might even be the stage of the game where it's like, oh, they already have the mana to recast it. Like by the time you like they cast their like bomb card and you like cast it on their bomb, and then it's like, oh well, I had 9 mana, my bomb cost 7, I can already recast it. This looks like an F to me. I don't think you should play this card. If you are really, really, really aggressive, you can like Doomblade a blocker out of the way, and they might not have time to both find the mana to recast it, or like yeah, maybe they could have eventually done it, but then they like die with like the card in their hand. If you're really putting the pressure on, I suppose this could be a playable card. For the most part, though, this card's bad. All right, Takasia's Welcome is an enchantment for a white and 2. Whenever more creatures with mana value 3 or less enter the battlefield under your control, draw a card. This ability only triggers once each turn. A minus, B plus, build around. But I say build around, but so many of these cards care about this mana value 3 or less that I feel like it's like really going to be an important part of playing white in this set that you have these cheaper creatures. Um, and so I initially would have started like this. I want to give this a build around grade, but I feel like you're going to be doing this a lot, actually. Like caring about this, and so it's going to be less build around me than it seems. To the point where, like, I bet you while you're drafting, you're going to be prioritizing the 3 mana creatures. Like I said, like I mentioned, the 3 mana creatures over the 4 mana creatures, just in the thought that, like, hey, I might pick up some of these cards that care about this later. I think you're going to like naturally start weighting towards those a little bit because there's so many of these effects in this set. Once you start doing this, I mean, this card is a bomb. It doesn't, it's 3 mana, so it's not like Welcoming Vampire where it's like a 2/3 on its own, flyer on its own. So it's like a little bit less than that, which is why I think it's like a B plus kind of. Like you'll probably draw a bunch of cards off of it, and you have to like be casting those specific cards. But like it's really super powerful once you start doing that. Like you'll draw a bunch of cards off this card. So I think it's like a B plus range, maybe even A minus if you like your entire deck is doing this. Though A minus, that feels a little strong. That feels a little strong, but it's like it's in between there, depending on your deck makeup. At least a B plus in the right deck. Again, I'd give it the build around, but I think you're going to be doing this a lot in this set. Rescue Retriever, isn't this? Yeah, this is the I think this is a jumpstart card. I don't think this is actually in the packs, so I'm not going to rate this. Um, it looks like it is insane though. Okay, so that is white. I'll be honest, white didn't look that good to me. White did not look that good to me. All of their cards, it seemed like I felt like they just didn't have a lot of power. They're also like really, really, really synergy based, but not synergy based in. So there are different. There's synergy and then there's synergy, kind of like card draw and then there's card draw. Um, there's some cards that are synergy based where they are solid on their own, and then if you have the synergies, then they shine, they sparkle. Mural comes to mind, where it's like Mural, she can take over the board on her own if allowed to attack multiple times, but if you have like a bunch of soldiers already, when you get that first attack, it's gigantic. Fine if you don't have the synergies, excellent if you do. A lot of the white cards to me looked like they are like only okay if you have the synergies. And once you have the synergies, they're not even like insane, but then it's like Okay, this is a decent card. So it looks like a really synergy-based color. Um, and none of the cards just looked that powerful on their own. I was fairly unimpressed with the white cards. We'll see. We'll have to see how they play out. And of course, some of the rares, like I'm looking at Siege Veteran here right now, and Siege Veteran looks really excellent. But a lot of the commons and uncommons didn't impress me too much. Didn't impress me. So we'll have to see how it plays out. And there are going to be like white artifacts in like when we get into the colorless section that are essentially white cards that might flesh out this color a little bit more and like kind of like fit into what's doing and it'll make all of this look more attractive. But so far, from what I've seen, I'm a little bit nervous about white in this set, but we'll see how it plays. Okay, blue is next. All right, and so of course we're starting with the blue commons. Here, our first one is Air Marshal. It is a blue and 1 human soldier 2/1, and for 3, target soldier gains flying until end of turn. I like this card. I actually like this card a lot more than. Oh, oh, I see it refreshed again. Um, I actually like this card a lot more than a lot of the white aggro cards. Oh, 2 mana 2/1, not amazing. Again, there's a bunch of 1/1s. But if you have soldiers to attack with, giving them flying is actually really good. And this ability is not that expensive. You get like Power Stone or two, that actually becomes really cheap, and you can just send your whole team to the skies. I actually kind of like this card more than the white uncommon, the 4 mana 2/3 that like when you play an artifact it gives creatures flying, because this card is like a more reasonable body on its front end. A 2 mana 2/1 starts the beats early. And then you can like give the flying on command, and it gives you something to do with power stones that you might be like making incidentally. Granted, the white 2/3 also when you make the power stones, it like gives them flying. But I really like that you can do this like as you need and not like with like weird sequencing that you like have to play your artifacts at a specific time in order to do it. Now it only does it to soldiers. That part is important. So I would say that this is like a C. I think this is like a C. Not insane or anything. You do want to be doing. You do want to be like aggressive. You generally. You do want to have soldiers, but assuming you have those, this actually like can send your like team to the skies, which is really kind of nice. Um, so yeah, I think this looks like a C to me. Um, Again, I'm already just with this one card. I'm like, oh, maybe blue is a good color for me. All right, so up next we have Curate. Is an instant for a blue 1. It has Surveil 2, which Surveil is you look at the top 2 cards. Well, Surveil 2 is you look at the top 2 cards, put any of them in your graveyard, and the rest on top of your library. So there is a bunch of graveyard synergies in the set. So I do like that that this is Surveil and not Scry. That's actually really useful. And then it says draw a card. I tend not to like this kind of card. So this is one. This is another one where I'm going to take this with a big grain of salt. I tend not to play cards like this because this is just a personal preference and play style part of my play style. But I don't play a lot of cards that just sink my mana into screwing around and just drawing another card. I tend to like to have my mana spent affect what is going on the board a lot more than just like fiddling around with my cards. I feel like that's a good way to die, is just like spend your mana on things that like aren't actually affecting the game state, and then you fall behind and all that. But this card actually does seem decent because the Surveil is not bad. And you can like set up graveyard synergies with it. And then you do get to dig a little bit and look for things, and it's instant speed. So like I imagine depending on how the rest of the set goes, there are some sets where it's like the instant speed really matters. Like, if you play like this card alongside a bunch of counter spells and the counter spells are good, then having this is kind of nice because your opponent plays something that you don't want to counter. Then you get to like, okay, well, I'll just like fix my draw really well instead and get ahead that way. But sometimes you just end up like tapping out for things proactively a bunch, and it's like, well, it just doesn't really matter that this is instant speed or whatever. I'll start this as just a solid C. It doesn't do anything special. Maybe a C minus, my own personal taste, but it just fiddles around. So it's never going to be like a C plus where it's like, oh, you really get there. It's not. It does, from what I can tell, this set doesn't have like a spells theme or anything like that. We're just casting the spell is okay. I think it's just a C, right middle of the road. Nothing good, nothing bad. Or we have Desynchronize. It is an instant for a blue and 4. Target non-land permanent Target non-land permanent's owner puts it on top or bottom of their library. Scry 2. Well, okay. I almost just read the flavor text just because I'm just like reading words here. Top or bottom is a lot worse than just bottom. Because if your opponent plays something really nasty, this doesn't truly answer it. This is a good tempo effect, though. I mean, it's expensive, but it will get anything out of the way, and it comes with a big scry. So that can be kind of nice to like set up your draw in the future. I think that this is probably like a C minus. 5 mana is a lot. 5 mana is a lot. And because your opponent gets the choice, like if it's on something that they just don't want to see again, they get to bottom it. If it's something that's critical to their game plan, they get to top it. And so it just doesn't. It plays a little funky where like if it truly is a problem for you, it doesn't actually ever deal with that. It is like it card for card, it just trades, but like at 5 mana, it also like very rarely will net you a mana advantage. Um, I think that this is like a C minus, maybe even a D plus, depending on how the set plays out. Though the scry is nice. I'm reminded of like Jaya's Fire NATO, which is something that he ended up not really playing that much, and just because like 5 mana was too expensive for that effect to like, and that even like actually permanently dealt with whatever you hit with it, right? So this seems poor to me, but there's probably a time when you play it. Again, the more aggressive I am, the more I want. Because if you're aggressive, then you go like what, like 2 drop, 3 drop, 4 drop, top out on desynchronize and get their blocker out of the way, and then it kind of doesn't matter if it's like top or bottom because it's about the tempo and like getting their stuff out of the way more, you know. Whereas if you're playing a control deck, you want your removal to actually deal with your opponent's problems. Well, problem cards. Yeah. All right, I'm next. Philology Archaeologist. It is a blue and 1 Human Scout 0/3. When Philology Archaeologist enters the battlefield, mill 3 cards. You may put a non creature, non land card from among the cards milled this way into your hand. If you don't, put a +1/+1 counter on Philology Archaeologist. Okay, this looks like a C to me. So again, milling 3 cards, slight graveyard theme. I like it. That's nice. That's nice value. Non-creature, non-land card. Depending on your deck, that can actually be a ton of cards. So a 0/3 that like draws a card for 2 mana, not bad, not bad. And then it has the fail state that it just turns into a 2 mana 1/4, which isn't amazing. Which isn't amazing, but that actually is like a decent blocker, right? Like 4 toughness and a point of power for your 2 mana creature, it's actually kind of big. You know, I mean, they can like block like a 3/3 that your opponent gets going. If your opponent's like going for the soldier token thing, like it just stops up all the soldier tokens for just a 2 mana card. This might even be like a C plus. Like depending on how the format plays out, it might be really important. Like this might be one of the better blue 2 drops because just the 0/3 is like going to be like a reasonable blocker against like a decent number of attackers. And like so if it's like a 0/3 draw card, like a 2 mana 0/3 draw card, that's a really good card. That's a really good card. And then again, if it's sometimes it's just a 2 mana 1/4, then that's okay. That's okay. You of course will want to stack your deck and like have like a lot of cards that like hit this criteria for this to be decent. But I think the fail state isn't even the end of the world if it's just the 2 mana 1/4. Don't get me wrong, that's bad. You definitely want to be defensive if you're going to be doing that, and hopefully your opponent is attacking you. If your opponent's like playing a control deck, they're not going to care about the 1/4. And if like you're playing an aggro deck, this will never really get there. But if you're defensive, I think that this goes into like C range. If you're consistently hitting with this, it's kind of a C plus. So yeah, not a bad card. All right, Koilos Rock. The 5 mana flash 3/3 of this set. I've talked about this a bunch. So yep, it's a 5 mana for a blue and 4 bird 3/3 with flash and flying. And when Koilos Rock enters the battlefield, create a tapped Power Stone token. Okay, 5 mana 3/3 flash flyer. Those always play just like okay. They end up, you know, they end up in like the C minus territory, but it does make a power stone. So if you really care about the power stones, this goes up a little bit because it's not a bad body, you know. And kind of like I mentioned earlier, if the set is like really slow, then being kind of a slow creature like in the 5 mana 3/3 flying size is actually not that bad because you don't have to defend yourself. Like it doesn't matter that it's not a good defender as much if you're not like really getting attacked. And a 3 power flyer becomes a real threat even if it's a little on the slow side. So I think that this might play like a C, but it's kind of in a C minus. You also don't need too many 5 mana spells in your deck, you know. So I'm gonna rate this at about a C minus. It could end up going up a little bit if just having a decent sized flyer is like a little bit better. And depending on how much your deck wants power stones, if your deck really wants power stones, getting one on top of a 3/3 flyer is actually quite nice. And of course, you can like ambush stuff with this, so that's not bad. C minus. All right, Latnam Adept is a human wizard for a blue and 3. It is a 3/3, and whenever you draw your second card each turn, put a +1/+1 counter on Latnam Adept. Okay, well, depending on how easily you have access to card draw, this becomes pretty decent. 4 mana 3/3 is not really great, but if you even just get one counter on this, a 4 mana 4/4 is a solid creature. That's a solid creature. You get two counters on this, a 4 mana 5/5, and then it can even go up from there. I would say once you get like even again, even just one counter, you've kind of done it. You definitely want to make sure you can get the first counter. If you get two counters, you're in great shape. This turned into a really good card. I'm gonna also call this a C, but in certain decks, it's probably like a C plus and turns into one of your better creatures. If you're consistently like you have a bunch of card draw in your deck, and so you can consistently like say with confidence, I'm going to draw an additional card after I cast this, maybe more than once. This actually gets kind of fat. Like once this turns into a 5/5, it's huge. You turn this thing into a 6/6, you've really done it. So I like this card, C plus, assuming the card draw is there. Okay. Up next, we have Machine Over Matter. It is an instant for a blue and 1. This spell costs 1 less to cast if you control an artifact creature, so it'll cost a total of a blue. Return target non-land permanent to its owner's hand. Okay, so it's like an unsummon, except it can get more than just creatures. So it's just a bounce spell for a blue and 1. But if you control an artifact creature, it's just a full bounce for it's just unsummon for blue. Well, again, not unsummon because you guys know what I'm saying. I'm sorry, I'm tripping over my words here. If you really care about the tempo, this card does it. Like, yeah, you really want to be aggressive. Control decks don't want on summons that much for the same reason that like the 5 mana instant that I was talking about earlier, the desynchronize or whatever, isn't great because it doesn't truly ever deal with like problem permanents. But if you're trying to like pressure your opponent, you're the one trying to get in there. On summons can be pretty good. They can be. The slower the format is, the less good something like this tends to be. So if this is a really slow format, this is gonna be like D plus range. But like if you really are applying the pressure, this can be like up to a C. It can kind of be an important piece of what you're doing. The discount on the card, it's not nothing, but it's also not a lot. It's like, okay, great, I get to pay 1 mana instead of 2 mana. Okay, like, yeah, all right. So the jury's going to be out on how good balance actually is. My initial rate is that it's going to be kind of low, and I think I'm going to like default to not playing this card very much. But there are certainly going to be some decks if I'm like, again, aggressive enough, or if my opponent shows me a bunch of stuff that I think I want to like lean into this sort of thing. Like for example, if they have a couple of the prison sentences, I think that's what the card's called, and they're like enchanting my creatures with auras, and like I can like save my creature with it and like buy back the creature. Like that's reasonable, I suppose. But even then, it's like you're still trading card for card. It's not like insane or anything like that. So I'm gonna rate this one pretty low and probably say it's like a D plus. But if you're aggressive enough and you want to like bounce a big blocker out of the way, because the other thing, like I'm saying that like the format might be kind of slow, but it's also possible that some decks like kind of lean into the archetype where they don't do a lot for a lot of turns, and then they cast something really big and fat and count on it to save them. And if that's the case, then just like going like unsummon on that thing that they're counting on to save them and get them out of a bad spot actually could be big game. So if the more defensive decks kind of take that sort of a deck structure, this could actually go up in importance. All right, up next we have Mightstone's Animation. It is an aura for blue and 3, enchant artifact. When Mightstone's Animation enters the battlefield, draw a card. Enchanted artifact is a creature with base power and toughness 4/4 in addition to its other types. This seems like a good card. This seems like a B, maybe, because the thing is that you can put this on Power Stones, so it's like actually really easy. Like you don't have to have like it's typically pretty rare in most sets to have artifacts in your deck that both aren't creatures already and that you're okay with turning into creatures, so they're not like, I don't know, like an equipment or something like that where it's like I don't actually want to turn this into a creature. This card, however, does do that. Like it's like, or I'm sorry, in this set, however, there's a bunch of power stones and things like that. So like you can just slap this on a power stone, and that power stone becomes a 4/4, and you draw a card. This card, it seems incredible actually. This might even be a B plus. And unlike a lot of like spells like this, where it's like, okay, so you have like just a normal like non-token artifact, okay, like something that you might actually want, and then you point this thing at it, and then your opponent points a removal spell at it. Well, you get 2 for 1. Oh no, oh geez, it's like it's a problem. But if they're just like pointing their like disenchant at your power stone token, Okay, like they got a Power Stone token out of you. Like it's like you trade one for one and they eat one of your tokens. I mean, that's obviously like not, amazing for you or anything like that, but like that's not the blowout that it could be. You know what I mean? This card looks really incredible. I bet you this is one of Blue's best commons. This looks like a B plus maybe in this set. You get to turn like some random like Power Stone sitting around, or it doesn't even have to be a Power Stone. There are other artifacts. When we get to the colorless spells, I'm sure there are going to be a bunch of artifacts that this also looks really good on. I just don't know them off the top of my head to name them. But yeah, you turn like a Power Stone into a 4/4 and draw a card for 4 mana. This card looks good. This has got to be one of Blue's best commons, I think. If you get there with the artifacts, that is. All right. Up next, we have Retrieval Agent. For a blue and 3, it's a human soldier 2/5, and for 2 mana, Retrieval Agent gets +1/-1 until end of turn. This looks like a C minus to me. Not incredible. 4 mana 2/5 is a decent defensive body. The ability is a little expensive. Even if you have Power Stones, it's probably going to be tough to activate that multiple times. So like you're going to need 4 mana to turn this into a 4/3. That's not great. So it's like a decent defensive body, and then it gets like cute, you know, power toughness changing. If you have a bunch of power stones, you could start slapping for 6 with this, which is kind of nice, but you really have to be going off with it then. I'm going to say that this is like a C minus, maybe a D plus if it just ends up playing out that the 2/5 body isn't good. Basically, where I'm at with it is the 4 mana 2/5 body has to be decent enough because the ability is a little too expensive, even with Power Stone in the set, to be like really excited about it or to really be able to get like a lot of utility out of it. If it was 1 mana, I would be changing my tune on this a little bit, and I would say that this card was actually kind of decent because then you could like really afford to just like pump a bunch of mana into it to get it to trade up with like 6 toughness creatures and things like that. At 2 mana, it's like way too expensive to do that reliably. And so I think this is going to fall in the C minus territory. Just not that important, but it could, depending on how much extra mana you have lying around, it could turn into like a real threat. And 5 toughness is a lot. Tough to attack into. C minus is where I'm going to land. It also could be worse. If the 2/5 body is like not good, this just look a little too slow. This could end up in the D plus category. But it's a soldier. It's a relevant creature type. C minus. All right, Scatter Ray is an instant for blue and 1. Counter target artifact or creature spell unless its controller pays 4 mana. Boy, this one, because Power Stones allow you to pay for, I know I'm talking about Power Stones a lot, but they really do affect everything in this set. Like, it is really a big deal how Power Stones are going to interact in this set. So, yeah, counter target artifact or creature spell unless its controller pays 4. So you could pay for that with the Power Stones, which makes this a lot worse. I would actually say in a lot of sets that this card would be really pretty good. Now, being able to just like hit artifacts is really solid. And in the early game, this is going to be like actually like a pretty good spell. So I actually think this is probably like a C, C plus. But it does actually drop off more than the pay 4 would suggest in the later game because opponents are going to have more access to free mana to pay for the effect later on in the game. So in the early game, it's like really a pretty nice defensive spell, and you can actually eat a lot with it because 4 in the early game is a lot. And then it's going to steeply, like the curve at which that drops off is like a lot steeper than it would be in like other sets. Whereas like yeah, the 4 would just be like incredible in most sets, and it wouldn't drop off for a very long time at all. Here, you're going to start to see this plummet as the game goes on. So C, C plus, it's a much better in the early game. Just I would just use it on something, get it out of the way. Is my recommendation with this. All right, next, Stern Lesson. Draw 2 cards, then discard a card. Create a tapped Power Stone token. And it's an instant speed. This is like a C minus. This is like a C minus. Maybe it's just a C. So draw 2 cards and discard a card. So it's card neutral, but you also get a Power Stone for whatever you need your Power Stones for. So making a Power Stone does actually like really help this out. So maybe it's just a solid C. It doesn't let you like see a lot of cards. Like drawing 2 and then discarding 1 could be a big upgrade, especially late in the game. Like it's like, turn like 11, you have this card in your deck, you've saved a land in your hand, and then you cast this, you draw 2 real spells, and you discard the land. That's a big upgrade, and then it also makes the Power Stone. So it actually kind of like works like all stages of the game. Like it like will really like fix your draws. And I do like that it's instant because we just saw like what was that card called? I'm gonna go back and look. Scatter Ray. We just saw Scatter Ray. So like there's a reasonable counterspell that you want to cast in the early game. So being instant speed is not bad here. I'd say that this is like a C, maybe like a C minus. It is 3 mana. That's not nothing. And you don't get any card advantage. You're just fiddling around. But you make a mana, so you can make that mana back a little bit. C, about a C. All right, Third Path Savant. It is a 3 mana for a blue and 2 human wizard 2/3. Okay, with 7 mana, draw 2 cards. That's a heck of an ability. 7 mana is a lot, but as we talked about, like Power Stones are a thing. I think this card's like a C plus. A 3 mana 2/3 body is really pretty weak, but it's not nothing. And it's like only pretty weak if the card doesn't have an acceptable ability on it. This card has a great ability on it. It's super expensive, but what you do is like you only start activating this once you've like dumped your entire hand on the table, like you've gotten rid of all your other cards, and then like the game is like in a stalemate, and then you can just like start pouring mana into once you get to the stage of the game where you can start reasonably activating this, or you have like a bunch of power stones, so you can start like using this for like 3 mana. This card will just like draw you a million cards. I bet you this card will run away with the game in some board states, which is a lot to be for a common. Like not a lot of commons have the ability to truly run away with the game, and this one does in certain board states. So it's like a C plus. In certain board states, in certain like matchups, it's edging into B minus territory. Like, it is really expensive, and the 3 mana 2/3 body is a little soft and weak. But that ability, if you could start going off with that, and again, 7 mana is a lot, but at the point that you want to start just dumping your mana into your creature abilities, like that's towards the late game when you have the ability and the like no cards, the time and mana to do such a thing. This card can steal a game. Not steal it, but just win a game on its own, basically, once given the time and space. Not a lot of commons can do that. Not a lot of commons can do that. So this is close to a B minus. Maybe even it's like C plus, gets into B minus territory sometimes, depending on how well you can enable the ability, how good you are at getting into the late game. This card can be really, really, really good. In some, if you're getting beat up, it's pretty bad. But even then, it's like a 3 mana 2/3. It's not like it's embarrassing. It's just not great, And that's an acceptable fail state on a card that has as much power as this does on a common. I think this card's good. All right, up next, Urza's Rebuff. It's an instant for 2 blue and 1. Choose one. Counter target spell or tap up to 2 target creatures. Well, I like this card. I like this card. So I think you're going to have enough time to be casting counter spells in this set, is my feeling. Even if they are just like simple cancel, 2 blue and 1 counter target spell. I think even just cancel would be reasonable. And the fact that it has this tap up to 2 target creatures stapled onto it actually is like really nice, like gravy on top of that, because it actually makes this spell like really nice in like aggro or control decks in both modes, because aggro decks can, like, okay, say you're an aggro deck and you play a bunch of spells out, and then you like pass your turn to your opponent, you have like a good board of creatures, and then you pass with a bunch of mana untapped. Well, now you're in a position where like, okay, if they like cast something that would have saved them, like some sort of like big threat that was going to lock you down, oh well, counter it, no big deal. Or if they don't, or they just like cast something like adequate, or the opportunity presents itself, oh, actually you tap their blockers, and then you get a big attack and you kill them. Okay, so this like works pretty good in aggro decks. Look at it in control decks. Well, in a control deck, I mean, you get to the later stage of the game, you can just answer anything that it'll answer like any sort of like problem permanent that your opponent's trying to kill you with. Excuse me, I'm talking a lot. I sip my tea here. Counter spells are generally good in those kind of situations. You want to make sure that you can answer your opponent's threat. Unearth and some of the graveyard synergies make it a little bit worse. I will say that that does hurt these counter spells a little bit, but not bad. So there's a lot of stuff that doesn't fall under. So right, so the counter's still pretty good. And then if you really need to, now this is like a desperation move, but it's nice that it exists on this card. You can just tap up to two target creatures and just buy yourself time with that. That's not a good use of a card. You would never play like 2 blue and 1, tap up to 2 target creatures in your control deck. However, it is nice to be stapled onto a counterspell, because one of the weaknesses of counterspells is sometimes in a control deck, your opponent gets out on the board really fast, and then you have this counterspell sitting in your hand. It's like you played some blockers. They cast everything that they wanted to cast already. Your blockers weren't good enough. And then it's like, well, great, I have this counterspell as my opponent's like beating me up at the board that exists. In that situation, tap up to 2 target creatures actually can save you in the way that the counterspell can't. That's not a good spell. You don't want to be doing that. It's desperate, but it's way better than just having just a card that doesn't say that on it. Does it make sense? Um, so I think this card's decent. It's like a C. It's like a C. It's not really amazing on either of its modes, but the combination of the two makes it so that I'd be happy with this in my aggro or my control decks, which is that's something that's really important too, is that cards that are good in like whatever sort of shape that your deck takes. And it's like good in a variety of situations. Like the combination of all of it together makes this a card that I'd be like decently happy to play. I think it's a C. All right, next we have Weak Stone Subjugation. It's another aura. I mentioned enchantments earlier. There's a bunch of enchantments in the set, it turns out. Enchant artifact or creature. When Weak Stone Subjugation enters the battlefield, you may pay 3. If you do, tap Enchanted Permanent. Enchanted Permanent doesn't untap during its controller's untap step. Okay, this looks like a C plus to me. So I actually kind of think of these as like a card like this. I actually think of it as like a 4-mana removal spell that sometimes gets to be a 1-mana removal spell, because I like thinking of it as like the reliable mode, and then the bonus is the unreliable mode. Does that make sense? So yeah, blue and 3, you get to tap Enchanted Permanent, it doesn't untap. So this can lock down all kinds of gigantic things and just get you out of like trouble from like, I mean, it's like a creature kill spell for anything that doesn't have like really good abilities stapled to it or something like that. Like if the creature is offering size, this beats it, which is kind of nice. And having a removal spell like that in your blue decks is pretty important. And sometimes it gets to not only just be like a universal removal spell, but sometimes it gets to be a really mana efficient one too. Like you get to be like a 4-mana creature with it by just paying for 1 mana. You get to like play this and another spell on the same turn. That's really, really, really important for stabilizing, being able to like do a double spell turn like that. Typically, kind of unlike the Deadly Riposte, is that the card where it's like, oh, it only works against like tapped creatures. This is like the opposite of that, where it's like you get this sick bonus if the creature's tapped, but it doesn't have to be. You can tap it. Now, of course, this is weaker against cards with really good abilities, so it really hurts like in that regard if the creature has like, and we've seen a number of them that have like really good activated abilities on them. So this card could go down a value. I would start this as like a C plus though. I think it's like a decent removal spell. Not amazing, but solid enough. And I think your blue decks are going to like want these, even though it misses on a couple of targets. Again, it's kind of, you can't really overstate just how important the double spell turn of just paying this for a single blue, beating a problem permanent, and casting another spell on the same turn is. That's going to be a huge turn for blue decks. So I like this card quite a bit. All right, the last common. We have Wing Commando. It's a human soldier for a blue and 2. It's a 2/2 flying prowess. Oh, this is a beater. This is a beater. I gotta tell you guys, I'm liking blue so far. Yeah, 3/3 flying 2/2. I mean, I already talked is like decent. It's not like insane. The classic Windrake has been a little outclassed recently. But the prowess on this thing, it attacks as like a flying 3/3 for 3 mana if you're casting non-creature spells. That's really solid, and it can even get bigger than that. This looks like a CC plus to me too. Like probably just like a C. But then if you like doing the thing and you like have like a bunch of non-creature spells, and this is consistently attacking as a 3/3 flyer for 3, this is a C plus. Nice little beater, and it's got a relevant creature type. I like it. I like it. Okay, on to the uncommons. Okay, and our first uncommon is Defabricate. It's an instant for a blue or 1, blue and 1, not or. You have to pay them both. Choose one, counter target artifact or enchantment spell. If the spell is countered this way, exile it instead of putting it into its owner's graveyard, and or counter target activated or triggered ability. Wow. So this is a really good counter spell for this set. Now, granted, it does miss some things, but obviously there's a bunch of really good artifacts to get. And then I've seen like way more enchantments than I actually expected to see. Like upon like what I thought of when I glanced over the whole set. There's actually like a number of like solid enchantments that you actually want to hit. So both of those together are like really strong. So this hits like a huge number of things that you want to hit. Sometimes your opponents will just jam like non-artifact creatures, and this will be a problem. So I almost want to give this a B, but I think it's more like a B minus because it will miss some things. But I will say the exile is actually really, really important because we've seen a number of graveyard synergy cards. White like reanimates and things like that. And then also there's unearth spells, which a lot of the artifacts have unearth on them, and so the exile is like the real deal. Like that actually hurts. Okay, so Yeah, I think this is like a B minus. I think this is a really solid counter spell. Like it's just a really solid removal spell. Every now and then you might counter target activated or triggered ability. Unearth does count, I believe. I hope I'm not lying to you, but I'm pretty sure it does. So if like there's going to be a unearth creature that's a problem, like you can like beat that. There's not a lot of other triggered abilities that like you necessarily want to hit with that, but there could be. Um, so yeah, I think that overall it's a B minus. It might even go up to like just B range depending on just like so as of yet, I'm not sure just how many artifacts are generally going to make the average deck. I think there's going to be a decent number of them. If like pretty much every deck has a solid number of artifacts in it, like consistently, this is a B. If this does seem to miss sometimes, it's going to be a B minus. Either way, really solid. The counters in this set actually look pretty decent. Up next, Flow of Knowledge. It's an instant for a blue and four. Lots of instants in blue as well. So the counters are also gonna go up in value that way because you're gonna be able to wait to cast a lot of your instant mana or your instant speed stuff. So like it just makes the counter spells way better, like a little bit better at least than like they would be otherwise. So that's really important to note. Seeing a lot of instants. All right. I'm sorry. Blue and four instant. Draw a card for each island you control, then discard two cards. Okay, so this is another one of like the monocolor spells. You need a bunch of islands for this because if you just have three islands, draw three and discard two for five. Ain't it? It ain't it. It's fine, but like it's what you just like cycled. You just like fixed your hand for like 5 mana. Ain't it? I don't think that that's good. If you have five islands, then it's like draw five and then discard two. So like you can like just like fix your hand hugely, like that's really incredible. So if you're like mono blue, this card is like really good. I mean, this is like a B level draw spell then. If you're like split colors though, until you hit four islands, I don't think that this card's good. Even when you do hit four islands, it's like, okay, you've kind of done it. You've kind of done it. It's still like a C plus then, maybe a B minus. But it's like it's definitely lower. But so the closer you are to mono blue, the better this gets. If you really are on mono blue, like I mean, even it gets even better as the game goes on. What like if you have like six islands, if you're playing mono blue, it's what draw six, then discard two, so it's a draw four. But you also get to like set up your hand if you have like useless lands in your hand or something like that. Like that's so good. That's so good. So yeah, mono blue. This is like a B. B plus maybe even like it's an insane number of cards at instant speed. The if you're split though, this goes way down. It's like C plus range, maybe even like just C. Depending, it might even be playable. I'd be interested to see exactly how this plays out. It's really going to be speed of the format dependent because if say you're even like a split color deck, like you're like blue white or something like that, so you're like right down the middle. Um, Cards like this become a lot more playable if the games last like 15 turns. And so you have a lot more time that even if you are monocolored, you have a lot more time to find the lands in question. And so the cards get better and better over time. Whereas like if the games don't last very long, then you really need to be like monocolored to like ensure that you are getting what you need to out of these cards. All right, up next, Forging the Anchor. Lots going on here. It is a sorcery for a blue and two. Look at the top five cards of your library. You may reveal any number of artifact cards from among them and put the revealed cards into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. All right, so this is like a build around B, maybe? If you are chock full of artifacts, like really chock full of artifacts, okay, so here's where I'm at with this card. Drawing, and this is, I know I keep like talking about like this exact same effect, but this is a big way like of how I think about cards and how I suggest maybe you think about cards, is that like cards with big fail states, the win states have to be that much better, and it's really important to identify that. Compare this card to just straight up divination, right? Sorcery, blue and two, draw two cards. Um, Divination can never miss. It can be cast in the early game to hit your land drops. Um, it can draw you any kind of spell. Like it can find you a removal spell. It can find you a creature spell. It can find you like anything you need. Sometimes it just draws you two lands. It also doesn't search for anything, but it never misses and can be cast at any point of the game and will always get you two cards. Lots of those things are not true about Forging the Anchor. You have to be chock full of artifact spells for this card to really do it. And if you and to kind of go back to what I was saying at the beginning of talking about this, if you cast Forging the Anchor and you hit 2 artifact spells and you draw 2, you're like, ah, I've done it. I basically 2-for-1. I've cast Divination. That isn't good enough. Yes, in that moment it is good enough. That is fine. You've done it. Like, that's decent. But this card has such a high fail state on it. Like, your deck could even be full of artifacts. You cast this, and it just whiffs. This card can whiff, even if you have a bunch of artifacts in your deck. That's a huge cost. So you really need to be hitting big with this when you hit it. Like, once you draw it, you're drawing 3 cards, 4 cards, but the thing is you can't count on that just even by just like by virtue of having lands in your deck. It's hard to count on hitting that many artifact cards with this. I think this card's like a C minus, even if you have a bunch of artifacts in your deck. It goes up a little bit if, say, like you're a control deck, you have lots of tools to lock down the board, and then you have like one big artifact bomb mythic. I don't even know what they are in this set, but like you have like some sick mythic in your deck, and this like digs 5 to like look for it. It gets a little bit better because then it's like, okay, even if I just 1-for-1 but I dug for my mythic, like that's like pretty good. Like it goes up in stock then a little bit. But as far as like just like a raw card draw spell, I think that this is bad. I think you need way too many artifacts, and even then it's a risk. Yeah, if you hit 3 or 4, you've really done it. I guess if you're hitting 2 consistently, it's okay, but I would be scared of this card. This is going to be one of my votes for cards that I absolutely hate, because every time I put it in my deck, it just whiffs miserably, and then it just goes to my graveyard all sad. And then I'm going to watch my opponent cast it, and they're going to like cast it as like a draw 5, and I'm just going to be like, well, why me? You know. But I don't think the card's good. I really don't. I think it's like a C minus. I think it's like a risky C minus. It might even be like a D plus. And then if you really, really, really get there with artifacts, like it starts going up a little bit. But even then, it still has a big fail state on it. If you really get there with artifacts and you have a sick mythic artifact, maybe it's like a C plus. I don't think it ever gets to like B minus range. It can hit in the B minus range. It can hit in the B range, but that's like the ceiling is contrasted to the floor. Do you understand what I'm saying? I would pick this card once I have a million artifacts already in my deck, and until then I wouldn't even look at it. All right, up next, Involuntary Cooldown. It's a sorcery for a blue and 3. Tap up to 2 artifacts and or creatures. Put 2 stun counters on each of them. This is a beating tempo effect. It is a sorcery, so things will only be tapped for like 1 turn, like one of your opponent's turns, 2 of their opponent's turns. It'll untap on the 3rd turn. But you get 3 turns of those creatures being tapped, right? Am I doing that right? Because you tap it, they're tapped that turn, they're not untapped, they're not untapped. Yeah, so you get 3 turns of those 2 creatures being tapped, okay? Definitely more of an aggro card than a control card, though this does buy enough time that if you have like enough ways to like, if you're playing one of those decks where it's like, as long as I like get to the late game I win, this can be a okay defensive card, because it really does gum up your opponent. You know, it's like 2 creatures that lock down for 3 turns. You know, that like it's really only 2 turns of attacks for them, so like that's a little bit worse. But if you're applying pressure, this is like double Doomblade, like on 1 card if you're like attacking for enough damage. So like this can be really powerful if you're an aggro deck. So like, yeah, if you're attacking, this is like a B. And if you're not attacking, it's like a C minus. Even then, the B might be a little bit high, because if you don't get there, you did throw away a card. But honestly, even then, like you tap up to 2 targets, and then you get like multiple attacks in. Even if you lose the card by like they get to untap with all of their creatures, you might have got enough done with that tempo window that like it still is like ultimately worth it, where it's like, okay, yeah, it's card disadvantage once they untap with their creatures, but I got so much damage in that they are now dead to my 1 flyer because I was able to generate enough tempo advantage in that time. This looks miserable if you were getting attacked and you're like trying to defend yourself. This looks like the kind of card that can just close a game down, but you'd probably want to be attacking. In certain cases, you may cast it in your defensive decks, but I think you really, 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 really want to make sure that you have like definite inevitability if that's the case. It's not really good enough if you're just like an okay late game deck. You're just throwing the card away for like a little bit of time. I might be wrong about that though. It's 2 creatures with 2 stun counters on them. That's a ton of time. That's a ton of time. Okay, Keeper of the Cadence is a 5 mana for a blue and 4 human wizard 2/5. For 3 mana, put target artifact, instant, or sorcery card from a graveyard on the bottom of its owner's library. Oh, this card's kind of annoying. I don't know how good it is. It's almost like a sideboard card. Because some decks aren't going to care about this at all. The 5 mana 2/5 is bad. That's not good. You're going to want to mostly use this on your opponent's cards to keep them from getting value out of them. Eats their unearth cards, eats their graveyard targets for like the reanimate cards. That's actually really annoying. Some decks won't care about it, and at that point, the 5 mana 2/5 is bad. Even then, it's also still a little slow. But I could see certain decks like this like eats up your opponent's like good synergy cards. Um, I don't think that there's too much reason to do it to yourself unless you just like don't want to mill out. And then it's like if you are like getting to the point where it's like okay, you're now about to reach the bottom of your deck, and then you can start stacking the bottom of your deck with 6 stuff. I guess that's a thing, but that's a very specific game state. I wouldn't rate this card too much on just that particular game state. Maybe also if you have like some sort of like tutor effects in your deck. I don't really know what exists in the set to do that, but that's something to consider as well. Overall, though, I think it just eats your opponent's graveyard synergies. I put this as like a sideboard like C, but most of the time this is going to be like a D. It's just not really doing it. This is another one I could be wrong. Just based on like how ubiquitous like having good action out of the graveyard is. If it turns out that like most decks have good graveyard action, then this card actually goes up quite a bit in value just because like eating all of your opponent's like graveyard synergies can be really good if like virtually every opponent has something that cares about the like stuff that cares about the graveyard. Um, it could be okay, but for the most part, I would say it's like a sideboard card, and then a lot of the time it's just not going to be good enough. All right, we have Splitting the Power Stone. It's a blue and 2 sorcery. As an additional cost to cast this spell, sacrifice an artifact. Create 2 tapped Power Stone tokens. If the sacrificed artifact was legendary, draw a card. This looks like an F. This looks like an F. There isn't a lot of artifacts that I would just be fine with sacrificing, just to make 2 Power Stones, because you're also spending the card on this. Like you could even sacrifice like so the most expendable artifact that you have is like a Power Stone token, and this like takes an entire card and just makes like one more Power Stone token. I suppose like you have like the artifact soldiers, you could turn like a 1/1 into 2 Power Stones, but that also seems really bad for a single card. Like you need the 1/1 artifact creature, and then yeah, you make the 2 Power Stones. There's a couple legendary artifacts that I guess you could play this with. Not too many of them though, right? And even then, it's like okay, like so you make 2 Power Stones, you sacrifice your legendary artifact, and then this replaces itself. This looks like an F. I don't think you're going to play this card very much. I think it's an F. All right, Take Flight. Yet another enchantment. Blue and 3, aura, enchant creature. Enchanted creature gets +1/+0, has flying, and whenever this creature attacks, draw a card. Wow. So in your aggro decks, this looks like a B. Like it just like it turns your creature into a really good beater. Like it adds a point of power, gives them evasion, and then allows them to like start drawing cards at the same time. And if you get multiple attacks with that creature, like that's like insane. Um, I maybe I overrate these kind of cards a little bit. Like I overrated like whatever the single blue curiosity enchantment was in Dominaria United, I forget, but like, but those ones actually have to attack. The fact that this is like whenever this creature attacks, it doesn't even have to like connect. That is actually like way better. It's way better because like if your opponent doesn't have removal for it immediately, like this card already replaces itself. Now, maybe if they already have like a blocker lined up, that's kind of bad because you're basically playing 4 mana to like cycle. Like they have like a 3/3 flyer, and then you put this on your 2/2. But then it trades with their 3/3 flyer, and then this cycles. Certain board states, this is going to run away with the game. It's going to turn one of your creatures into like a lethal threat and draw you a bunch of cards behind it. Other board states, it's going to be a little bit too expensive. It is 4 mana. This is like a B minus, I'd say. I think it's like a B minus, where it's like maybe even C plus, depending. Um, I know I just gave like anywhere from B to C plus, but it's really going to be dependent on the specific board state actually, which makes me want to put it in like B minus range because this card can run away with the game. Like you just put it on any creature, they can't block it. They don't immediately have the removal for it, so you get to just start smashing them and then drawing a bunch of cards. But then even if like you do like get an attack with it, and then they spend the removal spell on it, well, you still got a good attack in and drew a card. Maybe they don't have a removal spell for a couple turns. You drew 2 cards off of this and got some attacks in. Overall, I think this card has power, you know. B minus. Yeah, I'm gonna go with B minus. I'm gonna start with this card as good, and then I will adjust from there. How's that? All right, up next, Thopter Mechanic is a blue and 1 human artificer 2/1 creature. Whenever you draw your second card each turn, put a +1/+1 counter on Thopter Mechanic. When Thopter Mechanic dies, create a 1/1 colorless Thopter artifact creature token with flying. This card seems really good. 2 mana 2/1 that dies into a 1/1. Already pretty solid. I would say that that's already in like C plus territory, maybe just C, but I think like C plus territory, like a 1/1 flyer on top of your like 2 mana 2/1 is like pretty decent. And then the fact that this card can actually like start to grow, like if you like play this early and then like cast like a card draw spell afterwards and then like cast like and then like get another card, then you like play like take flight on this, that it starts to look really, really, really good. Because once you turn this card into a 4/3, your 2-drop turned into a 4/3 that makes a 1/1 when it dies. Like, that's incredible. You need to draw the cards. Even just turning this into a 3/2 and then having it make a 1/1 is like pretty good. That's like C plus territory. I'm going to call this a C plus, but really pretty nice because also it's a cheap creature, pairs well with the white spells, makes an artifact. This just has like a lot of different synergies on it. And even though it has the draw your second card each turn text on it, you don't even have to get there with that part of the synergy. If just the 2/1 that makes the 1/1 artifact flyer is already like kind of a good enough card on its own that I'd already call that like a C. And then it could also has like added value of maybe turning into like a real threat depending on how your deck is built. So I like this card quite a bit. All right, Urza, Power Stone Prodigy. He's got the Trump hair, kind of. He's looking real funny there. He is a 3 mana legendary human artificer creature. He's a 1/3 with vigilance. He has 1 tap, draw a card, then discard a card. So he's a kind of an expensive looter, but he has vigilance, so you can attack for 1 power, I guess. Whenever you discard 1 or more artifact cards, create a tap Power Stone token. This ability triggers only once each turn. Wow, okay. I actually like this card decently. So looters are just good. This one is a little slow because like it is a 3 mana, and then you have to like pay mana to start using its ability. But once you get the first Power Stone off of him, then the Power Stone kind of pays for the ability itself. Like he makes his own Power Stone to like turn him into just tap draw a card, or you can start using the Power Stone for other things. And then he starts to make more Power Stones. So he both like fixes your hand and has the ability to like start generating a bunch of mana for you. This looks like a B minus, like a really solid card, one that can really like help synergize your gameplay. Like, it just seems like a nice like glue card in your deck. Maybe glue isn't the right word, but it's like it's the kind of card that like isn't super powerful on its own, but it does a lot of things that just make your deck intrinsically better. It fixes your hand. It puts cards in the graveyard for your graveyard synergy spells. It makes Power Stone so you can start ramping stuff out. It just like makes a lot of cards that you could potentially have in your deck a lot better. So I like B minus for Urza Power Stone Prodigy. All right, last uncommon, Zephyr Sentinel, a 2 mana 2/1 flash flying creature. Well, you already kind of have me here. When Zephyr Sentinel enters the battlefield, return up to 1 target creature you control to its owner's hand. If it was a soldier, put a +1/+1 counter on Zephyr Sentinel. Okay, so this is interesting. So it could be a 2 mana 3 power flyer if you bounce a soldier with it, which could be a soldier token or just a soldier in general. Which a 2 mana 3 power flyer is really pretty good. Um, of course, you have to return a creature you control to its owner's hand, but that might not even have to be like all downside because, first of all, this has flash. So you can actually save another creature with it, which is clearly what's happening in the artwork here. So you can use it in response to a removal spell. And like, yeah, like 2-for-1 them that way. You get the creature back in your hand. And then if it's a soldier, you created this 3/2 flyer. So instead of your creature dying, you 2-for-1 them and make a 3/2 flyer for 2 mana. Yeah, that's really good. Even if it's just a 2/1, like the soldier part's just gravy. Even if you just make the 2/1, you 2-for-1 them and make a 2/1 flyer for 2 mana. I think this card's excellent. I think this card's a B. I think this card's like a B. You can run it out on turn 2 if you want to get the beats going early. You save it for later and just like, yeah, keep one of your best creatures alive. It turns into a real threat if you just bounce like a single soldier token. You can rebuy ETB effects. Like this card does a bunch of different things all of them good, and it's returned up to 1. You don't even have to do it, right? So all of that together, I think this puts it in like solid B territory. I don't think it's like a B plus or anything, but I might be wrong about that. Like depending on just how often this is eating removal spells, this could be one of Blue's better uncommons. The fact that it has like it's so versatile, it's like good in like all kinds of different game states, and it's cheap while being good in all kinds of different game states. It's hard to overstate like just how good like being cheap and good all the time is. Like that's a big deal. That's a big deal. So I like this card a lot. It's B, maybe B plus if you're consistently like 2-for-1 in your opponent's removal. Like, imagine, yeah, it's like your opponent points a removal spell. It's something you bounce it, eat the removal spell, and make a 3/2, and that card has an ETB on it. Dang, you did it. So I like this card a lot. This is really, really, really good. All right, cool. On to the rares. All right, and our first rare is Drofna, founder of Latnam. He is a 2/1 human artificer advisor creature. He's a 2/1. For a 2/1, return target artifact you control to its owner's hand. And for 3 and tap, copy target artifact spell you control. So this card's kind of tricky. This is doing a lot of things. First of all, 2 mana, 2/1, solid body. Like leading with that. Really excellent. Sometimes you're just going to trade this off with something. Sometimes you're just going to start beating up your opponent. I like well-costed creatures. I don't know if you can tell. The first ability does like a bunch of different things. Again, you rebuy ETBs. You can save your artifacts from removal. So it does like, double duty there. Really pretty nice. And then what's cute is it works with its second ability, copy target artifact spell you control, because you can like say you like run something out that later you'll want to copy. You can then return that thing to your hand and then later copy it, and you can like keep doing that. Honestly, if you have the mana to do it, like, and you have Power Stones, like maybe this actually doesn't become all that expensive. You can just continuously keep copying that. Now the second ability does have a tap on it, which is very smart design, so you can't just like machine gun it and just go off. But like every single turn you can like pick up that artifact, make another one, and you just continuously copy. Excuse me. This really nice artifact. All of that is like really good value on just a 2/1. I think this is like if you have a bunch of artifacts in your deck that you want to copy, I think it's like a B, maybe even a B plus, depending. Like it's kind of giving me, well, now you have to spend the mana on this, so it's not exactly the same, but it's kind of giving me like Helm of the Host vibes. Like, you could just like every single turn make an additional copy of the spell that you want. That's really good. That's really good, And sometimes you can make some really sick stuff with it. So it's really going to depend on the quality of the artifacts in your deck, but this can really like take over a game, which is not a bad thing for to be on a 2 mana 2/1 that also has the ability to save your stuff from removal and buy back your ETBs on its own. This card just does so many things. I think it's like a B plus even in a lot of decks. I don't think it gets into A minus territory, but on some board states it does. On some board states it absolutely does. Yeah, really, I think it's a really excellent card. I think I'm going to pick and play this card highly. All right, Hercule Master Wizard. It's a 2/1 human wizard advisor. It's a 2/4. At the beginning of your end step, if you've cast a non-creature spell this turn, reveal the top 5 cards of your library. For each card type among non-creature spells you've cast this turn, you may put a card of that type from among the revealed cards into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. Okay, so interesting. So 2/1, 2/4, reasonable body, not insane, reasonable, decent. And then on your turn, you need to cast non-creatures. But when you do, you get to look at the top 5 and then get one of those out of that 5. And then if you cast multiple, you get to look at 5 and get one of each kind. I don't know if this means that you want to like. I think it's a little bit better if like you like stack all the same card type. For example, instance. There's a lot of instance. I think you want to like stack all the same card type, even though like you can get the really sick value of like casting like an instant and an enchantment, and then you look at the top 5 and there's an instant and an enchantment, and it's like, oh yeah, sick, I've really done it. You like just drew 2 for free. I think it's a little bit better to just stack all the same card type as much as you can, so you can just guarantee the card every single turn. But that said, I mean, your deck might not even like work that way. You know what I mean? Also, if you cast non-creature artifacts, this does find creature artifacts. So that's right. Yeah. So yeah, you cast an artifact. It's a non-creature spell. No, you get to then find like an artifact creature. So that's a really big deal too. So this plays really well with your artifacts. I think that this is like a B plus. maybe I keep a B plus and A minus is like it's that grade that's like right there where it's like is this like fully bomb level or is it just extremely good? It's right there. It's right there. Um, I'm gonna be very happy to pick and play this card highly, like I said. Or well, like I said for Drafna, they make quite a pair. Uh, yeah. I think you want to stack a lot of the same type if you can. Well, honestly, even just like playing your deck just normally, like if you have like a decent number of the enchantments and you have a decent number of the instants and a decent number of the sorceries, like you're gonna hit with this often enough that it's fine. It's a lot worse if you like cast an instant, you look at the top five and there's like enchantment, artifact, sorcery, and you're like, ah, well, shoot. That's why I think you want to stack better. I think that just if you're just getting the guaranteed card every turn, that is good enough that you don't have to like shoot for the moon and like try to get like multiple of the different card types and like really like crush it. I just don't think you need to do that on a card that's this reasonably priced that offers you free cards every turn. So yeah, I would say that this is like a B plus, maybe an A minus in some decks if you like have a deck full of instants or whatever. All right, Hercule's Final Meditation. Something happened to her. Um, it is an instant for triple blue and 4. And as long as it's not your turn, this spell costs 3 more to cast. So it actually can be a 10 mana spell. Return all non-land permanents to their owner's hand. End the turn. That's why it's so expensive on your opponent's turn. This looks like an F to me. This is super expensive. It's really super expensive. And cards like this never play as well as you think they would. Um, it's possible in some decks like this ends up being good enough where it's like, yeah, you cast this and then it's like, okay, now you both have to recast all your stuff, but your stuff is just like gigantic and better, and then maybe you ate like a bunch of your opponent's like soldier creature tokens or whatever. Like, but I just don't think, like, it's like so tricky to have this ability actually be good that for a card as expensive as it is, it's just way too situational to cost that much mana. And then if you can cast the 10 mana version, like, yeah, you get to time walk your opponent, I suppose. But that's a really expensive time walk, and you throw the card away. I think this is an F. I don't think you want to play this card. All right, we have one with the multiverse. It's an enchantment for 2 blue and 6. You may look at the top card of your library at any time. You may play lands and cast spells from the top of your library. And then once during each of your turns, you may cast a spell from your hand or the top of your library without paying its mana cost. This is a tough card to rate. This is a tough card to rate. First, for one, an 8 mana enchantment that is really expensive. But I think that it's ultimately good. I think it's like in the B plus range. Maybe just, I think it's in the B plus range because once you get there, a lot of times the problems with cards like this, like say it didn't have the third clause, the you may cast a spell from your hand at the top of your library without paying its mana cost. Say you didn't have that clause. A lot of times one of the big problems with a card like this is like you tap out for it, and then it's like, and then it doesn't do anything for the board immediately. And so it's like, you've tapped out for this gigantic spell, but you still have to untap, and so good luck. But this allows you to like tap out for it and then also play something to defend yourself for free, and it offers to like draw you a card immediately for free. And then once you untap with it, you can come close to winning the game. It's like if you get stuck with a bunch of lands on top of your deck, you definitely want some like card filtering in your deck to like be able to, like, because if you have like a stack of 3 lands on top of your deck or whatever, this card actually doesn't do a lot. It like kind of like helps dig you through, so it might, I would be curious to see this one in play. It actually might not be good. Once you have it in play, obviously it's strong, but you do have to get to 8 mana, and it just can fail if you, again, you just like have a bunch of lands on top and you can't clear them off the top of your library, so you're not actually doing the thing. Because the dream is like you like cast this, you get to cast a spell for free off the top, um, and then on your follow-up turns, it's like, okay, you have like a whole bunch of mana and you get one free cast, and you just like machine gun off the top of your library and you cast like 4 spells and you're just like blah 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 blah, and you go like full Urs on them and you just go crazy. But like you could just be foiled by a couple islands, which makes this 8 mana spell really risky. I'm gonna say it's like B plus territory. Um, but it may actually be that this is one of those cards that's just not quite good enough and it just ends up being bad. I'm willing to be wrong on this one. I'm going to start with it being good, and then go from there. Sky Strike Officer. All right, it's a human soldier for a blue and 2/3 flying. All right, good start. When it attacks, create a 1/1 soldier artifact creature token. Wow. All right, so it's all right. It makes its own army as a 2/3 flyer for 3. Then tap 3 untapped soldiers you control. Draw a card. B plus. I'm in the B plus A minus range again. I think this is just a B plus. So really good rate on the creature. 3 mana, 2/3 flying, already acceptable. Pretty good actually. Whenever it attacks, you make an additional 1/1. That's incredible. The fact that it just like can make multiple 1/1s just by like doing what you want to do with it anyways, huge. That's gigantic. Like not only does it like present more offense, but also like it helps you win a race. Like you can like block ground creatures with it if you need to, and so like it just like absolutely wins the race. Just like naturally adding to the board on an already solid creature size like this, really, really, really solid. And then if you are getting blocked up in any meaningful way, then you could start just drawing multiple cards off of this. This card's incredible. This is like an incredible first pick here. I don't think it's quite A minus because like you do have to like play it and then start attacking with it, and then later you have a bunch of soldiers and maybe you can draw a couple cards or whatever. But it is definitely like one of the better cards you can pick. Like, it just seems like just a really again you run this out on turn 3, and I'm a little nervous actually because I've seen like a number of cards like this in this set so far where it's like you just run this out on turn 3 and your opponent probably already feels like they lost the game unless they can kill it immediately. So that's a really, really, really good sign. Yeah, B plus. Oh boy, here we go. Teferi Temporal Pilgrim. It's a legendary planeswalker Teferi for 2 blue and 3. Starts with 4 loyalty. Whenever you draw a card, put a loyalty counter on Teferi Temporal Pilgrim. 0, draw a card. Okay, already pretty good. -2, create a 2/2 blue spirit creature token with vigilance, and whenever you draw a card, put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. Okay, and then -12. Target opponent chooses a permanent they control and returns it to its owner's hand. They shuffle each non-land permanent they control into its owner's library. So you win the game. And they get to keep one thing. Okay. I mean, you have to get there, though, which is pretty insane. This looks just like an A. Like, so you cast it, you probably -2, and you make a 2/2 with vigilance. That turn is probably pretty weak. So maybe this is like an A minus, but I think it's an A. Because just casting it for 5 mana and making the 2/2 is anemic. Like, that's not a lot. The turn that you cast it, it is not a lot. Okay. And then every turn after that, it's insane. Because then you draw a card, goes back up to 3. The creature token's like now a 3/3. Maybe you cast something else, like some other like card draw, and then it actually like if you follow it up with another card draw spell, basically, then he like goes back up to 5, and then the creature token's a 5/5, and so now you've made a 5/5, drew extra cards, and you have a 5 loyalty planeswalker. But he's just the reason I say like he's only like maybe like an A minus is because he is kind of vulnerable. If you already have the board locked down though, and then you like play the 5 mana and then draw a card so that like he is up to 5 loyalty and has already replaced himself, and like in other words, you don't need to make the 2/2 in order to defend him for the turn. Like you're probably gonna win that game. Like that's absurd. So he's probably an A. I mean we're kind of splitting hairs at this point. All I'm saying is he actually is if you play him and then use the minus ability, he actually is kind of vulnerable, so you have to be careful. But if you have the space, like if just doing that creates enough space for you, or you have the space where like you're not afraid for him, or you can even just draw the card, incredible, you win. And even if even if he is vulnerable, you make the 2/2 and then he like makes some sort of attack and he dies, like okay, like it's he ate some damage, he made a creature. Also, that creature. Also, he gains a loyalty every turn when you just draw a card naturally on your turn, so you don't even have to follow it up with the card draw spell. Like that's absurd. So yeah, just make sure you cast him on a board where you lose the turn, and you'll probably win the game. Hey. Oh, here we go. Urza's Command. Instant for 2 blue and 2. Choose 2. Creatures you don't control get -2, -0 until end of turn. Create a tapped Power Stone token. Create a tapped 0/0 colorless construct artifact creature token with. This creature gets +1/+1 for each artifact you control. Scry 1, then draw a card. Okay. Card seems good. This card seems good. I certainly like it more than Kayla's Command. I think it was pretty wise for them to have the colorless construct enter the battlefield tapped, because otherwise this is like way too much of a beating, especially in conjunction with the creatures you don't control get -2/-0 until end of turn. So basically, I see all, unlike Kayla's command, where it's like some of the abilities, it's like, yeah, I guess if you're going to do that, you can do that. This one, it's like really contextual, but all of the abilities are going to be good. Like any combination of two of these at instant speed for 4 mana is going to be decent. With the weak is probably being like create a power stone, then scry and then draw a card. So it's like cycle and make a power stone. That's pretty weak. But a lot of times you're going to get way better than than that anyways. Like that's, unless like I can't imagine why you would choose like that combination unless like you got like nothing going on, you know. Because even just making the construct and then making the power stone, it's like, okay, well, you get like a 1/1 if you have no other power stones, plus it makes the power stone. Basically, you know, this does like a whole bunch of things contextually. It eats your opponent's alpha strikes. Like you can crush combat with this card, even though the creature comes into play attacked. It's like, oh, your opponent's like attacking out, and then you just like block, 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 and then make an incredible trade by casting this card, and then also draw a card, or also make another creature, or also get like a more mana going. This looks like a B plus to me. Really excellent in all kinds of situations. You can cast it proactively, you can cast it defensively. It leaves like an actual reasonable creature behind. That construct can get gigantic. You could be making like a 5/5 while also drawing a card for like 4 mana at instant speed. Like this, it's insane. Like that's absurd. So the more artifacts you have, obviously, the better this card gets. And the fact that you can also like fog your opponent or crush a combat with it, like it just does so much. This is like a B plus, I think. All right, the Temporal Anchor. Triple blue and 3 legendary artifact. Hey, we can sacrifice it at the Power Stone breaking, whatever. At the beginning of your upkeep, scry 2. That is a lot of scrying. That's a lot of value. Like you get to rip through your deck doing that. Whenever you choose to put one or more cards at the bottom of your library while scrying, exile that many cards from the bottom of your library. So when you put them on the bottom, you actually exile them. During your turn, you may play cards exiled with the Temporal Anchor. Wow! Yeah, is this an A minus? The only reason I say it's not an A is because it's pretty expensive. It is triple blue and 3. It doesn't do anything the turn that you cast it. So there is a huge weakness, but then after that, it starts to like draw you two every, it's like draw two every turn. Basically, you can only play them with cards like on your turn. So like you don't want to put your counter spells underneath or whatever. Um, but yeah, you get to just rip through your deck, and then like it's like drawing the cards anyways, like when you like move them from the bottom. So like all of the lands, you just scry those to it because you don't need to draw those, and then you can just play them off the Temporal Anchor. So all your lands just get out of the way. Not that you want them anyways, but I mean you might. Like there are expensive cards in this set. um and really, like even cards that you want, you can tuck them under the anchor as long as you're not too worried about this thing dying, because yeah, you can just like, yeah, tuck them under. It's like, okay, well, I can cast that later and I'll get to draw whatever card I want. It's actually going to be kind of challenging a little bit to know what to scry. Like I wonder if the proper play pattern is for everything that isn't like a counter spell or something that you have to play reactively to just scry it all underneath anyways. You could get blown out by an artifact removal spell. It is true, so you got to be kind of cognizant of that. But this looks like an A minus as long as you can cast it and not die the turn that you cast it. Once you start untapping with this thing, I think you win the game. I'm pretty sure. So again, I'm going to start with this high. I'm going to start with this as like A minus, insane card draw engine, and then scale it back from there. I haven't seen too much artifact destruction except for the Lauren, the 3 mana Lauren, and Disenchant. And other than that, I actually haven't seen really anything to destroy artifacts. Now, of course, we haven't gotten to red or green yet, so I mean, I don't really know about that, but not a ton at least, you know, so far. And then Geology Enthusiast. Actually, I think this is the yeah, never mind. This is the one of the Jumpstart cards. So okay, so that is blue. Blue looked way better than white to me. I was jazzed about a lot of the blue cards. I'm looking forward to playing some blue decks in this set. It looks really, really, really good. Looks like it has good aggressive options, good defensive options, excellent synergy. Kind of the opposite of what I was talking about with the white cards, where I felt like the white cards needed synergy to even be acceptable cards. The blue cards felt like they were decent, and then you do the synergy thing, and then they're incredible. I think blue looks really, really, really good. So yeah, excellent. Okay, so I'm going to wrap up this set review. I wasn't sure how I was going to do this, how much time this was going to take. Like I said, this is my first set review. So if you've made it at this point, thank you for watching. Please remember to like and subscribe, and be on the lookout for the other colors coming out shortly. I'm going to call this here. I wasn't sure if I was going to do all of them right now, but I'm starting to realize that my voice will be unable to handle that. So I'm going to kind of do all these together. I think I'm probably gonna do black and red, and then I might do green and multicolor together, and then colorless. Is how don't quote me on this yet, but that's how I anticipate splitting these, and hopefully I'll be able to get those out in the next couple of days. I know the set's coming out before too long. I really want to be able to churn these out for y'all. Um, let me know your thoughts and feelings in the comments, please. Because I'll put it this way: I know I talked a lot. I know this is probably going to be a lot longer than other people's set reviews. Like I said, it's kind of how I do things. I have a lot of thoughts I want to offer. If you think I got anything majorly wrong or like whatever, just go ahead and give me the tongue lashing. Leave it in the comments. I'd love to hear it. A lot of this is like I'm kind of like just responding with my gut here, and I might have missed a few things, and I'm sure some of this will be adjusted as time goes on. This is actually a pretty difficult set to evaluate in some contexts. So yeah, I'm excited to figure out what I got wrong and what I got right. In any case, thank you so much for watching. I will see you for the next set review. Yeah, see you next time.